The phantom ally is a psychological sleight of hand, a phantom presence conjured not with smoke or mirrors, but with carefully chosen words and insinuations. It is the creation of an invisible supporter, an expert, a group, an unnamed authority, or even a vague majority, used to give weight to your opinions, push decisions, or coerce compliance without ever revealing a real source. This tactic exploits our innate tendency to conform, to feel outnumbered, and to trust unseen authority figures who seem to echo the consensus. Phantom ally. Imagine someone hesitating on a decision. You nudge them, not by arguing your point directly, but by softly saying, "Everyone I've talked to feels the same way," or, "A friend of mine in legal thinks this is the only smart option." The person you're speaking to doesn't question it, because you've invoked social proof and hidden expertise. You've put them in a conversation not with just you, but with a silent chorus backing your agenda. This illusion is especially potent when delivered with conviction. Humans fear isolation. We are biologically wired to align with the pack, to avoid being the lone dissenter. The phantom ally wraps your opinion in a social cloak, making opposition feel not just like a disagreement with you, but with something larger, more authoritative, even inevitable. This tactic is common in politics, negotiations, and even in toxic relationships. A manipulative partner might say, "Even my friends think you're being unreasonable," creating shame and self-doubt. A cunning executive might mention board members or stakeholders who have expressed concerns, when in truth, no such conversations ever happened. The power lies not in the truth of the ally, but in the emotional pressure their existence creates. Because it is so abstract, the phantom ally cannot be challenged directly. You can't argue with someone who isn't in the room. You can't disprove a vague group. This makes it one of the most difficult tactics to refute, especially in the moment, when doubt creeps in and silence fills the room. Used with precision, the phantom ally bends reality itself, leveraging imagined influence to shift real-world decisions. It creates invisible weight in your corner, and most people never realize they're being outnumbered by ghosts. The sickness card. The sickness card is a masterstroke of manipulation cloaked in frailty. It involves feigning weakness, physical, emotional, or mental. Not to gain sympathy, but to escape scrutiny, sidestep accountability, or shift responsibility. At its core, it's about weaponizing vulnerability, tapping into others' instinctive urge to protect, forgive, and accommodate. It is not just lying about being sick, it's turning the idea of fragility into a shield and, more dangerously, a sword. When someone plays the sickness card, they don't need to cry or collapse. Sometimes it's a quiet sigh, a pale face, a distant gaze, or a carefully timed complaint. "I'm just not feeling myself today." "I've had this headache all morning." "This week has been so overwhelming, I don't think I can take on anything more." These phrases slip under the radar, bypassing logic and slicing straight into the emotional core of the listener. Suddenly, expectations are lowered, demands are softened, deadlines are extended, and the player walks free, untouched, unchallenged. This tactic thrives because of how society values compassion. Most people don't question another's suffering. To do so risks seeming cruel. And so, the sickness card becomes almost sacred ground. Once it's played, it grants immunity. Criticism becomes taboo. Accountability feels abusive. And the person who dares question it risks immediate social backlash. It's used in families, in offices, in relationships. The employee who mysteriously falls ill before every major presentation. The partner who suddenly has a panic attack when confronted with uncomfortable truths. The student who always seems to have migraines the night before a deadline. Over time, this tactic conditions others to stop expecting, stop confronting, stop demanding. It's emotional blackmail hidden beneath a layer of pity. And it works, because it taps into guilt. People don't want to be the one who pushed too hard. No one wants to feel like they caused someone to break. So they back off. They apologize. They lower the bar. And the sickness card holder wins again, not through strength or merit, but through the illusion of collapse. It is a tactic that makes others carry your weight while you wear the mask of helplessness. And the most dangerous part? It often leaves no trace. False front of chaos. The false front of chaos is a mask, messy, scattered, often underestimated, crafted not out of failure, but of ruthless precision. At first glance, it appears as disorder. The missed meetings, the forgotten details, the chaotic desk, the inconsistent emails, the rambling ideas. But beneath this seemingly unstructured exterior lies a cold, calculating mind, using disorder as a weapon. This is not incompetence. This is camouflage. People trust what they can understand. When someone seems all over the place, they are rarely seen as a threat. They're brushed off, pitied, or managed from a distance. And that's exactly where this tactic gains its grip. Because when people stop watching you closely, you gain freedom. Freedom to move, to plan, to manipulate. When they assume you're unorganized, they lower their guard. When they think you're distracted, they reveal more than they should. And when they finally realize you've been playing them, it's already too late. The power of this tactic lies in its ability to disarm. Leaders, rivals, co-workers, even friends, see chaos and instinctively move to fix it, guide it, or simply get out of its way. In doing so, they inadvertently give power to the person behind the mess. That person now holds unpredictability in one hand and invisibility in the other. No one scrutinizes the fool, the dreamer, the confused. But they should, because sometimes the fool is just an assassin in costume. In war, generals have used this principle for centuries. Feint retreat. Scatter your forces. Seem disoriented. Let the enemy come forward thinking they've won, only to realize they've walked into a carefully laid trap. In business, it might be the CEO who acts outlandish in public while silently consolidating power behind closed doors. In relationships, it's the person who plays the lovable mess, always needing help, always needing time, while manipulating hearts and dynamics without ever being suspected. False chaos buys time. It invites miscalculation, and it gives you the space to make moves without being seen. The real danger isn't in the people who seem powerful. It's in those who look powerless, clumsy, harmless, because their power is in being dismissed. That's when they strike. Controlled ignorance. Controlled ignorance is the art of playing dumb with a razor-sharp purpose. It's the deliberate decision to act uninformed, oblivious, or naive, while in reality, you know exactly what's going on. This tactic is not about lying, it's about restraint. You don't reveal what you know. You let others believe they are ahead of you. You let them speak freely, reveal intentions, slip up, underestimate you. All while you watch, silent, calculating, gathering leverage in real time. People have a primal urge to feel smarter, more informed, more in control than the person in front of them. When someone appears less knowledgeable, it triggers a dangerous kind of overconfidence in others. They feel safe. They let their guard down. And that's when the real information begins to spill. They correct you, expand on things you misunderstand, and in doing so, give away more than they ever intended. What they don't realize is they're walking into a trap of their own making. You asked the wrong question on purpose. You said the wrong name, mentioned the wrong date, claimed ignorance, because you wanted them to correct you. And they did. Controlled ignorance turns the other person into the teacher, the guide, the explainer. And there's no better way to map someone's motives than to let them explain themselves while believing they're in control. Every word they say becomes a breadcrumb you weren't supposed to have. Every overstep becomes a weakness, and they never see it coming. This tactic is used by master interrogators, negotiators, spies, and manipulators. It's how politicians bait rivals into exposing hidden plans. It's how prosecutors trap criminals into contradictions. It's how toxic partners uncover secrets. And it's how power is seized, not by force, but by patience and precision. It takes discipline to use. You must suppress the urge to correct, to show your knowledge, to prove you're not the fool they think you are. But every time you hold back, every time you let someone believe you're clueless, you're feeding their arrogance. And arrogance always leaks information. The moment they realize you knew all along is the moment they lose control. And by then, it's already over. The third option trap. The third option trap is a masterstroke in psychological framing, a manipulation of choice that masquerades as generosity while steering the outcome exactly where you want it. It begins with a setup. You present two options, both flawed, both strategically unappealing. One might be too harsh, the other too lenient. One too expensive, the other too cheap. One extreme, the other impractical. You make sure neither feels right. You watch the discomfort build. And then, like a savior, you introduce a surprise third option, one that appears balanced, reasonable, and refreshingly ideal. But it's not ideal for them. It's ideal for you. This third option was never a spontaneous compromise. It was the plan all along. The first two were bait, psychological bookends designed to corner perception and make the third feel like salvation. People don't want to feel forced. They want autonomy, control, a sense that they've made the best decision on their own terms. The third option trap hijacks that impulse. It makes people believe they've outsmarted a rigid binary, when in truth, they've walked straight into your hands. Politicians use this tactic constantly. They frame a problem in two outrageous ways. Either cut all funding or raise taxes dramatically, then swoop in with a third, reasonable plan that was their original goal from the start. Salespeople use it when offering three pricing tiers. One cheap but stripped down, one expensive and bloated, and one perfectly balanced option that gives them the highest margin. Even in relationships and arguments, the trap emerges. Either stay in this painful situation or break everything apart. Or, says the manipulator, we could try my suggestion instead. The genius of the third option is that it feels like compromise. It triggers relief. It ends confusion. And most people never stop to question how convenient it is that the solution just so happens to align perfectly with the interests of the person who presented it. It doesn't feel like manipulation, it feels like rescue. That's the brilliance of it. You don't push people. You guide them, quietly, invisibly, until they choose exactly what you wanted them to all along. And they thank you for it. Strategic overload. Strategic overload is a tactic of quiet suffocation. It works not by brute force, but by burying its target in a blizzard of small, seemingly urgent tasks. Emails, requests, questions, meetings, follow-ups. None of these tasks seem harmful on their own. In fact, they often look helpful, responsible, or routine. But together, they form a smokescreen, a deliberate distraction designed to keep someone so mentally occupied, so time-strapped, so consumed by the details, that they fail to notice what truly matters slipping by in the background. This is not simple inefficiency. This is power play disguised as productivity. At the heart of strategic overload is the understanding that attention is finite. People can only track so many things at once. So if you flood their focus with trivialities, constant status updates, unnecessary approvals, back-to-back deadlines, they lose the ability to see the bigger picture. And while they're sweating over formatting a report or chasing down a signature, you're quietly making the real decisions, signing the actual deals, shifting the true balance of power. This tactic is devastatingly effective in corporate, political, and even personal dynamics. A manager might overload a colleague with menial tasks to keep them from asking deeper questions. A manipulative partner might constantly demand small favors, texts, or reassurance, not because they need them, but to dominate your energy and attention. In war rooms and boardrooms alike, the person seen as busy is often being blinded. The emotional trap is what makes it so insidious. People caught in the overload believe they're being productive. They're checking boxes, meeting deadlines, staying on top of things. But they're not. They're drowning in the shallow end while the tide pulls the deeper matters far away. And when the dust settles, they realize the project changed direction, the power shifted, the trust moved, without them even noticing. Strategic overload creates exhaustion, confusion, and vulnerability. It isolates the target in a fog of responsibility while decisions are made without them. By the time they look up, it's already done. The overload wasn't a mistake. It was the strategy. Weaponized praise. Weaponized praise is not about flattery. It's about seduction and sabotage. It is the calculated use of compliments not to lift someone up, but to inflate them. To feed their ego, blur their judgment, and make them vulnerable to manipulation. Unlike genuine encouragement, weaponized praise isn't given to empower. It's given to disarm. You tell someone exactly what they want to hear, over and over, until they begin to believe it. Then, while they bask in the illusion of their own greatness, you quietly take control. This tactic preys on one of the deepest human needs: validation. Most people are starving for it. So when someone suddenly showers them with compliments, "You're brilliant. No one does this like you. You're the reason this team even works," they inhale it like oxygen. Their critical thinking dulls. They stop questioning their choices. They start coasting on the fumes of their own inflated self-image. That's when they become predictable. That's when they start making mistakes. When you weaponize praise, you make your target feel untouchable. You tell them they've already won, that they don't need to try harder, listen closer, or prepare more. You feed their arrogance until it turns into overconfidence, and then, slowly, they begin to stumble. They stop checking their work. They dismiss feedback. They alienate others. And when they finally fall, they never see the knife coming, because it was hidden in the applause. This technique is used by master manipulators in leadership, politics, and even close relationships. A cunning rival might praise you publicly while plotting your downfall behind the scenes. A controlling partner may build you up just enough to keep you loyal, while keeping you blind. Even in competitive environments, a competitor might praise your past work just enough to trap you in nostalgia and prevent you from evolving. The most dangerous praise isn't the praise that lifts, it's the praise that sedates. It's the kind that wraps around you like silk, warm and reassuring, while your edge dulls and your instincts fade. And by the time you realize you've stopped growing, someone else has taken your place. Weaponized praise doesn't make you better, it makes you comfortable. And comfort is the silent killer of power. Slow poisoning. Slow poisoning is the silent art of erosion. It doesn't strike with confrontation or loud accusation, but with a whisper, a carefully placed doubt, a half smile, a well-timed question. It is the tactic of subtly, methodically dismantling someone's reputation, influence, or credibility, not in one blow, but in a slow, deliberate drip that corrodes perception over time. The beauty and horror of it lies in how invisible it is until it's too late. This tactic thrives in social circles, workplaces, families, anywhere perception matters. It begins innocently. A comment about how someone always seems overwhelmed. A joke about how forgetful they are. A raised eyebrow when their name is mentioned. It never looks like an attack. It's always just an observation, just a concern, just being honest. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because it looks like caring. It looks like truth. Over time, these small barbs begin to accumulate. Colleagues start second-guessing the target. Friends begin treating them differently. Confidence in their ideas starts to waver. Not because of anything they've done wrong, but because a seed of uncertainty was planted in the minds of others, and that seed has started to grow. You don't need to discredit them directly. You just need to keep turning up the volume on their flaws, real or invented, until others begin to hear it echo in their own minds. The target of slow poisoning often has no idea it's happening. They feel something shift, but can't quite name it. People seem colder. Trust fades. Opportunities dry up. They're fighting a ghost war, one where the battlefield is made of impressions, and the enemy never appears in full view. It's emotional gaslighting, but targeted at others rather than the victim themselves. Those who use this tactic do so with patience. They never push too far too fast. That would break the illusion. Instead, they let the poison seep slowly, so it looks like others came to the conclusion on their own. That's the final cruelty. Not only is the victim isolated, but it seems as though they brought it upon themselves. Slow poisoning doesn't just destroy relationships, it rewrites reality, and it does so with nothing more than a smile and a whisper. Selective generosity. Selective generosity is a kindness with hooks in it. It looks like a favor, a gift, a timely act of compassion, but it is never free. It's the deliberate offering of help with the intention of creating imbalance, of fostering an unspoken debt that weighs on the recipient long after the gesture is done. On the surface, it's generosity. Underneath, it's a transaction designed to be remembered, revisited, and redeemed at your convenience. When someone gives freely without asking for anything in return, we feel gratitude. But when that gift is delivered with subtle emotional charge, when it's made clear that they didn't have to help, that they went out of their way, that you owe them something even if they never say it, you start to feel something heavier: obligation. That's where the power begins to shift. You feel watched, evaluated. You feel like you can't say no next time. You feel like the scoreboard just tilted in their favor. Selective generosity works best when it's unexpected. The manipulator chooses just the right moment, when you're weak, lost, or desperate, to swoop in and play the hero. They don't just help you, they rescue you. They make you feel indebted not just for the action, but for the timing, for the emotion it evoked. And because it wasn't asked for, it becomes almost impossible to refuse or repay. You're caught in a psychological trap, gratitude wrapped in guilt. This tactic is common in toxic power dynamics. A manager who covers for you once and reminds you of it for months. A friend who lends money with no deadline but makes passive comments about loyalty. A partner who forgives a mistake but weaponizes it later. The help looks like grace, but it's a leash. And the worst part? You might even thank them while they're tightening it. Selective generosity isn't about kindness. It's about control. It turns giving into a form of possession. The more grateful you feel, the more trapped you become. And because you don't want to seem ungrateful, you stay quiet. You comply. You give back, on their terms. And they smile, knowing the debt was never meant to be repaid, only remembered. Manufactured dissent. Manufactured dissent is the unseen hand that turns allies into enemies. It is the calculated engineering of division, whispered words, twisted truths, subtle comparisons, all designed to ignite conflict where none existed. The goal is simple: break their unity before they ever realize what's happening. Because when people are united, they are strong. But when suspicion infects their bond, their strength begins to rot from within. This tactic begins in the shadows. It might start with a question. Did you notice how she didn't consult you on that decision? Or a comment disguised as concern. I'm sure he didn't mean to take credit, but you did do most of the work, right? Nothing overt, nothing traceable, just enough to stir discomfort, to light the fuse. And then you step back and watch the fire build. The brilliance of manufactured dissent is that it never looks like manipulation. It looks like insecurity. It looks like ego. The people you've targeted start to see betrayal where there was none, selfishness where there was teamwork, and they begin to defend themselves, not against you, but against each other. Meetings become tense, cooperation fades, trust evaporates. While they're busy guarding their backs, they stop watching you. This tactic is especially powerful in groups where unity is crucial: work teams, leadership circles, activist collectives, even families. A manipulator who sows doubt between key players ensures that no one can rise strong enough to challenge them. Even the suggestion that someone might be disloyal is often enough to shift dynamics. Because humans are tribal, and when we feel we've been wronged, we seek justice, even if we were never actually wronged at all. The emotional damage runs deep. Paranoia, resentment, guilt. The victims of manufactured dissent often end up thinking they're the problem. Or worse, they become the problem because the manipulation draws real anger, real mistakes, real explosions. The mastermind never has to raise their voice or take a side. They just tilt the balance, let gravity do the rest. Once unity collapses, people can be picked off one by one, not by force, but by distrust. That's the elegance of manufactured dissent. It turns strength against itself, and no one sees the knife, only the wound. Mirror masking. Mirror masking is the chameleon's game, an eerie, calculated mimicry that slides under your defenses and makes you feel seen, heard, and understood, even when nothing about the interaction is real. It is the deliberate act of adopting the personality, values, speech patterns, and emotional tones of the person you're engaging with, not to bond, but to control. It's not about connection, it's about concealment. At its heart, mirror masking preys on the deeply human craving for recognition. When someone reflects our beliefs, mirrors our passions, or even echoes our insecurities, we feel safe. We assume they're like us. We trust them faster. We open up. But that comfort is often a setup. Behind the familiar tone and shared values is someone who isn't connecting. They're adapting. They're absorbing your personality like a costume, using it to bypass your instincts and hide their true intentions. This tactic works because most people aren't watching for mimicry. It doesn't raise alarms. In fact, it feels good. It makes you say things like, "We just clicked," or "They just get me." What's really happening is that they're molding themselves into your ideal. If you're logical, they're rational. If you're emotional, they're deeply empathetic. If you lean rebellious, they'll match your edge. And just when you start to feel that this is someone who sees the world as you do, they pivot the dynamic. You trust, they take. Mirror masking is a common tool in manipulation-heavy environments. Cult leaders use it to attract followers. Con artists use it to gain quick trust. Abusive partners use it to seem like soulmates. At first, they appear to be your reflection. Later, they become your controller. It's an illusion that only cracks when the mask slips, when their behavior suddenly doesn't match the identity they borrowed from you, when their values change depending on who they're around, when their entire personality seems suspiciously tailored. That's when you realize they were never real. They were just a reflection. But by then, the damage may already be done. You trusted them. You revealed too much. You gave them power because you believed they were just like you. That belief wasn't innocent. It was engineered. And you never saw the mask, only yourself. Invisible strings. Invisible strings are the unseen levers of power pulled in silence, a masterstroke of manipulation that allows someone to orchestrate outcomes while making others believe the decisions were entirely their own. It is not control through force, but through illusion, the art of suggestion, redirection, and calculated silence. With this tactic, you don't just get what you want, you make others want to give it to you. At its core, this is a dance of ego. People crave autonomy. They want to feel empowered, respected, and independent. The genius of the invisible strings tactic lies in how it feeds that craving while subtly weaving a web of influence. You plant an idea in a conversation, softly, almost as a passing thought. Later, when they act on it, they're convinced it was their own inspiration. And you smile, not because they agreed, but because they never knew you led them there. It starts with understanding. To pull invisible strings, you must study people. Know their ambitions, their fears, their insecurities. Once you know what drives someone, you don't need to push, you guide. You mention an opportunity that aligns with their hunger. You offer support that fuels their pride. You frame choices so that the one you want them to pick feels like the most logical, even noble path. They feel powerful, but they're walking a road you paved. This tactic is used by the most dangerous types of manipulators, the ones who never seem to be in charge. The advisor who appears loyal, but always manages to be one step ahead. The friend who suggests, never commands, yet always seems to get their way. The lover who never argues, but makes you second-guess your instincts until you follow theirs instead. Invisible strings make confrontation nearly impossible, because on the surface, there's nothing to fight against. You can't rebel when you believe you're already in control. That's the brilliance of it. The true puppeteer stays in the shadows, letting you move freely, never realizing your strings are tied to a hidden hand. By the time someone realizes they've been directed, manipulated, led, it's usually after the damage is done. And the one pulling the strings? They're already pulling new ones elsewhere. Decoy leadership. Decoy leadership is the coldest kind of command. It's leadership by proxy, by sacrifice, by design. It's the act of elevating someone into a visible position of power, not because they are qualified, not because they are trusted, but because they are disposable. They are set up to shine in the spotlight, to bear the weight of decisions, to become the face of authority, until things go wrong. And then, they burn. Publicly. Alone. This tactic is not clumsy delegation. It is deliberate orchestration. The real power remains hidden, insulated from consequence. The decoy is chosen for their eagerness, their ambition, or sometimes their naivety. They believe the opportunity is genuine, that they're finally being trusted, finally being seen. They throw themselves into the role, not knowing they've been handed a loaded crown. Every decision they make, every public statement they give, every risk they take, is quietly tied to a bomb that someone else built, and they'll be the one standing there when it goes off. Decoy leadership thrives in high-stakes environments. Politics, corporate warfare, failing organizations, or unstable power structures. A struggling company might promote a charismatic but underprepared manager to lead a doomed initiative already planning to clean house when it fails. A politician might appoint a scapegoat advisor to push an unpopular policy, knowing full well they'll be sacrificed when backlash hits. Even in personal relationships, this can play out, where one person pushes another to speak up, take the risk, deliver the hard truth, so they can stay clean. What makes this tactic so cruel is how convincing it looks. The decoy is praised, supported, empowered, until the winds shift. Then the support disappears. The praise turns to blame, and the very people who elevated them are nowhere to be found. They were never building a leader. They were building a buffer. This tactic doesn't just destroy reputations. It destroys trust. It teaches others that visibility is dangerous, that stepping up means becoming a shield for someone else's secrets. And while the decoy absorbs the backlash, the true orchestrator continues their climb, untouched, unseen, and one step closer to absolute control. Controlled transparency. Controlled transparency is the art of calculated honesty. It involves revealing just enough of the truth to seem authentic, trustworthy, even vulnerable, while carefully concealing the intentions, motives, or strategies that truly matter. It's not lying. It's letting the truth serve a purpose. A partial confession that disarms. A selective story that humanizes. A glimpse behind the curtain that makes people believe they've seen it all, when in fact, they've only seen what you wanted them to. This tactic thrives on one of the most powerful psychological principles, the illusion of disclosure. When someone opens up, admits a flaw, shares a struggle, confesses to a mistake, we instinctively feel closer to them. We lower our guard. We interpret their honesty as vulnerability, and vulnerability as truth. But in the hands of a skilled manipulator, that moment of perceived intimacy is a tool, a trap even. You might admit to a minor fault. I can be a bit impatient sometimes, or disclose a past failure. I used to be terrible at managing deadlines. These admissions are true, but irrelevant. Meanwhile, your real weaknesses, your real goals, your real agenda remain sealed behind a polished wall of candor. You've satisfied the listener's hunger for honesty without sacrificing a single piece of leverage. Controlled transparency is especially potent in negotiations, interviews, or conflict resolution. You reveal enough to build rapport, to seem open, to gain trust, yet you never reveal what would compromise your position. In relationships, it's the partner who opens up just enough to keep you emotionally invested while hiding their deeper detachment. In politics, it's the leader who publicly admits to missteps while quietly advancing unpopular policies in the background. The brilliance of this tactic is in the balance. If you share too little, you seem guarded. Too much, and you lose control. But just the right amount, just enough to make people feel like they've seen the real you, and you become untouchable, because people rarely question what they believe they already understand. The trap works because people trust transparency, but they forget it can be weaponized. And by the time they realize the truth was a performance, not a revelation, the moment and the power has already passed. Clockwork sabotage. Clockwork sabotage is disruption dressed in coincidence. It's the deliberate manipulation of timing, quiet, subtle, deniable, to fracture plans, delay momentum, and dissolve progress without ever throwing a visible punch. It's not about direct confrontation or open sabotage. It's about the missed email, the wrong file, the rescheduled meeting, the printer that broke down, the traffic jam you couldn't avoid. It's destruction by delay, surgical, strategic, and almost always explained away with a smile. This tactic thrives in environments where timing is everything. Fast-moving projects, critical negotiations, public launches, or crisis response. Every hour matters. Every delay compounds. That's where clockwork sabotage enters. Not to stop something outright, but to slow it just enough to kill its rhythm. Because when the rhythm is gone, so is the power. The genius of this tactic lies in its plausible deniability. No one can prove intention. No one can accuse without sounding paranoid. The saboteur simply shrugs, apologizes, feigns confusion. "Oh, I didn't realize that was the final version." "Sorry, I thought the meeting was tomorrow." "I tried to call, but my phone died." Harmless mistakes, reasonable slip-ups. And yet, the outcome is always the same. Someone else's work gets harder, slower, more chaotic. Clockwork sabotage is especially brutal when done from the inside. A team member who's secretly competing with you. A colleague who resents your rise. A manager who feels threatened. They don't argue or refuse. They cooperate, but just slowly enough to make everything suffer. You feel it, but you can't call it. You just know something's always late, always off, always one step behind where it should be. Over time, this drains energy. Morale crumbles. Trust erodes. You start to doubt yourself, question your team, overcompensate for delays that aren't your fault. And the saboteur? They maintain their mask, helpful, harmless, innocent. That's what makes clockwork sabotage so lethal. It doesn't need explosions. It wins by inches, by shaving time off every edge until your sharpest strategies go dull. It leaves no trace, no enemy to confront. Just missed opportunities, failed momentum, and the nagging suspicion that something, someone, is always just a little too late. Silent arbitration. Silent arbitration is the quiet rise to power by doing nothing, at least nothing obvious. It's the strategy of letting others clash, letting tempers flare, letting egos collide, while you remain composed, neutral, observant. You don't take sides. You don't enter the fray. You let them exhaust themselves in conflict, while you position yourself, subtly, patiently, as the calm, rational voice in the storm. The one everyone turns to when things fall apart. This tactic preys on chaos, but never creates it directly. You don't start the argument, you just make sure it keeps going. A question here, a delayed response there, a neutral comment that fuels both sides. That's a fair point, but I also see where they're coming from. It's a performance of balance, of wisdom, of reluctant leadership. While others fight to be heard, you become the one who listens. And in doing so, you become the one who decides. People crave stability in the midst of conflict. When relationships fracture, when teams divide, when tempers run high, there's always a moment when both sides grow tired, uncertain, disoriented. That's your moment. That's when the silent arbitrator steps forward. Not as a dictator, but as the reasonable one, the unbiased presence everyone trusts. By refusing to take a side early, you've made yourself acceptable to all sides later. You become the one who understands both perspectives. And just like that, power is handed to you, voluntarily. This tactic works exceptionally well in workplaces, families, leadership battles, and political movements. The louder others become, the more poised you appear by contrast. The more they react emotionally, the more credible your calm becomes. And the more divided they grow, the more they need someone, anyone, to make the final call. That someone is you. Not because you fought for it, but because they pulled you into that seat themselves. But here's the twist. The silent arbitrator was never neutral. They were guiding the outcome from the start, not with confrontation, but with patience and restraint, letting others destroy their own credibility while preserving theirs. By the time the dust settles, they're the only one left standing, and no one remembers they never even raised their voice. The fall guy play. The fall guy play is the dark art of preloaded blame. It's the strategic positioning of someone, anyone, as the designated scapegoat, the lightning rod, the one who will fall when the storm finally hits. It is not about avoiding mistakes. It's about making sure when the mistake happens, the spotlight turns anywhere but you. It's survival through sacrifice, control through deflection. The brilliance of this tactic lies in preparation. The fall guy isn't chosen in panic. They're chosen before things go wrong. Sometimes they're ambitious, but unprotected. Sometimes they're new, inexperienced, or just too eager to please. They're offered responsibility, framed as trust. They're looped in to learn, handed visibility, praised publicly. But what they're really being handed is the fuse to a bomb already counting down. When disaster strikes, missed deadlines, botched campaigns, bad calls, the story is already written. We trusted them. They were in charge of that. I wish I'd been more involved. The fall guy becomes the symbol of failure, and the true puppeteer disappears into the fog of plausible deniability. They weren't in the room. They weren't on the thread. They were misinformed. And just like that, the narrative turns. The public sees a mistake. The insiders see a martyr. And the one who orchestrated it all? Untouched. Cleansed by the blood of their own appointed sacrifice. This is how toxic leaders rise. By shedding blame like a snake sheds skin. In offices, it's the junior staffer who missed the memo. In politics, it's the aide who acted independently. In relationships, it's the partner who was too emotional or didn't communicate well. Always someone else. Always just believable enough to satisfy the crowd and close the case. And it doesn't stop with one fall guy. The smart manipulator has layers. If one burns, another is lined up, ready, willing, unaware. What makes the fall guy play so insidious is its silence. The fall guy often doesn't realize they've been chosen until the damage is done. They walk into the fire thinking they're part of the solution, only to realize, too late, they were the solution. Not to the problem, but to someone else's exposure. Strategic compliance. Strategic compliance is obedience laced with ambition. It's the deliberate choice to say yes when every instinct screams no, not out of weakness, but out of design. This tactic is about playing the loyal servant, the agreeable teammate, the compliant follower, only to position yourself closer to the levers of power, quietly studying the system from within, waiting for the perfect moment to turn that obedience into takeover. It begins with submission. You nod, agree, follow orders. You smile when overlooked, deliver when underappreciated. People see you as dependable, maybe even harmless, and that's exactly what you want. Because strategic compliance is camouflage. While others are asserting dominance, fighting for control, or burning bridges with impulsive defiance, you are gaining access. You're being trusted. You're being let in. The brilliance of this tactic is how it turns patience into a weapon. You make yourself indispensable, not by challenging the system, but by becoming essential to it. You earn confidence. You get closer. You learn how things really work, where the weak points are, who the real decision makers are, who cracks under pressure, and who can be bought with flattery. And all the while, you are planning. People rarely expect betrayal from someone who's always said yes. That's the trap. By the time they realize your compliance was a strategy, you've already taken what you needed: reputation, information, influence. You've become the person they can't afford to lose, the one they depend on. And when you finally pull the pin, whether it's exposing corruption, taking the lead, or dismantling their control from the inside, they never saw it coming, because they believed you were on their side. This tactic is not for the impulsive. It requires restraint. You must stomach the indignity of being overlooked, the boredom of false humility, the grind of calculated servitude. But for those who can endure it, the payoff is devastating. It's how empires are taken, not stormed, but infiltrated. Strategic compliance is the quiet rebellion, the smile that hides the knife. It is obedience used not to serve, but to conquer. Implanted echo. Implanted echo is the most elegant form of manipulation. Quiet, smooth, and undetectable. It's not about telling someone what to think. It's about planting a seed so carefully, so casually, that they believe the thought was born in their own mind. It feels natural, self-generated, even intuitive. But it wasn't. It was planted. By you. And by the time they speak it out loud, it echoes with a chilling familiarity, because you were the one who whispered it into existence. This tactic works because people resist being told what to do. Direct suggestions trigger defenses, ego, suspicion. But when a person believes an idea is theirs, they embrace it fully. They protect it. They fight for it. That's the genius of the echo. You never own the idea. You let them carry it like it was theirs all along. The implantation begins subtly. A loaded question, a half-thought, a dropped phrase. It's strange no one suggested this yet. Or, I wonder what would happen if someone tried it this way. You don't push. You don't insist. You just nudge. You let silence do the rest. And in a few days, or maybe even minutes, the idea returns. But this time, it comes from them. They say it with pride. They believe it with conviction. They look to you for agreement, not realizing they're hearing your own voice bounce back at you. That's the moment you nod, affirm, encourage. Not too much, just enough. The echo has landed. Implanted echo is used in politics, marketing, negotiations. Anywhere influence hides behind free will. A skilled manager uses it to make employees think a plan was their initiative. A manipulative partner uses it to steer choices while pretending to stay neutral. Even in friendships, someone can guide your decisions without ever appearing controlling, because it always feels like you chose it. The danger is in how natural it feels, because you can't defend yourself from a thought that feels like your own. There's no resistance, no second guessing. And once the echo takes root, it doesn't just guide action, it rewrites memory. You'll swear it was your idea from the start. And that's how control becomes invisible. That's how influence becomes ownership. Black hole silence. Black hole silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of a void so loud it devours the room. It's the calculated withdrawal of communication, the sudden disappearance of presence, the intentional retreat into silence, not as escape, but as domination. When used precisely, this tactic becomes a psychological vacuum that pulls everything toward it: anxiety, speculation, guilt, fear, and most importantly, attention. This is not simple avoidance. Black hole silence is weaponized absence. You go dark just when your voice is most expected. You leave messages unanswered. You miss the meeting. You disappear from the group chat. And in doing so, you ignite a storm of uncertainty. Are they angry? Are they okay? Did we do something wrong? Are they planning something? In the silence, people begin to project. Their imagination becomes your instrument. Humans hate unanswered questions. We are addicted to closure, addicted to feedback. When someone vanishes, especially someone normally engaged, it creates discomfort, then worry, then panic. Your silence becomes louder than any confrontation. It shifts the power dynamic without a single word. In relationships, this tactic turns into emotional chaos. A partner goes quiet after a fight, not to heal, but to force the other into desperation. In professional settings, it can be used to derail negotiations, to destabilize authority, to punish without appearing aggressive. A missed reply from a usually responsive colleague can send an entire team into paranoia. They start rewriting the narrative without you, while you sit at the center, invisible, and in complete control. The brilliance of black hole silence is that it's untouchable. You didn't say anything wrong. You didn't do anything aggressive. And yet, everyone feels it. Everyone reacts. And the more emotional they become, the more power you gain. People will apologize to fill the silence. They will offer concessions just to bring you back. They will shift their behavior, hoping to win your return. But this tactic is cruel in its precision. It manipulates others' need for connection and validation. It isolates, not to escape, but to reign. Silence, in this case, isn't passive. It's surgical. It's unsettling. It's domination wrapped in emptiness. And by the time you finally speak again, the room is already under your gravity. The compassion trap. The compassion trap is manipulation dressed in warmth. It's the calculated performance of empathy, designed not to comfort, but to disarm. It works by making someone feel safe, heard, and emotionally held, just long enough for them to open the floodgates and spill what they'd normally guard with their life. Secrets, weaknesses, confessions, regrets. They come pouring out, not under pressure, but under the illusion of connection. And once they're out, they're no longer yours. They belong to the person who asked with a tilted head and soft eyes. This tactic preys on the most human of needs: to be understood. When someone leans in and says, "I get it. I've been there too," or "You don't have to hide anything from me," something shifts inside you. Walls come down, defenses falter, and suddenly, the things you promised yourself you'd never say, you say. You whisper them into the ears of someone who looks like they care. But they don't. They're just listening. To take. The best manipulators know how to mirror pain. They'll match your sadness, echo your frustration, even share fabricated stories of struggle to create the illusion of mutual vulnerability. But while you're bleeding truth, they're collecting data. Every detail is a thread they'll pull later, whether to control, blackmail, discredit, or simply manipulate you into further submission. They didn't comfort you because they cared. They comforted you so you'd surrender. The compassion trap is especially dangerous because it teaches you to doubt yourself. When the betrayal comes, when your secrets are used against you, it doesn't just hurt, it confuses. But they seemed so kind. They said they understood. You feel naive, exposed, and by then, the damage is done. They've extracted what they needed, and you're left ashamed, not just of what you shared, but that you ever believed it was safe to. This tactic appears in toxic relationships, manipulative therapy, office politics, and anywhere emotional intimacy can be weaponized. The predator plays protector, the interrogator becomes confidant, and the victim hands over the keys willingly, never knowing the door was already halfway open. Because nothing opens a person faster than the feeling of being understood, and nothing cuts deeper than realizing that feeling was a lie. Legacy theft. Legacy theft is the quiet assassination of credit. It's not about stealing ideas in the shadows. It's about waiting, watching, letting someone else do the work, take the risk, build the foundation. And then, just when the idea begins to shine, you step in, smiling, supportive, well-positioned, and slowly, subtly, the credit begins to shift. You don't claim the idea outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, you echo it louder. You rephrase it better. You present it to the right audience. You talk about it in meetings where the originator isn't present. And with every retelling, the spotlight drifts, inch by inch, away from the one who created, and toward the one who now carries its momentum, you. This tactic is devastating because it hijacks legacy, the one thing creators can't duplicate. It's the emotional payoff for all their unseen labor. Legacy is what validates the struggle, the sleepless nights, the relentless belief when no one else cared. And legacy theft takes that validation away. It rewrites the story so that you are remembered as the spark, even though someone else bled to ignite the fire. It happens everywhere. In offices, a manager presents their subordinate's solution as a leadership initiative. In academia, a senior scholar develops a concept a student planted years before. In creative spaces, a co-founder emerges as the visionary, while the true innovator is erased from the narrative. And in each case, the thief doesn't just take the idea, they inherit the legacy attached to it. It's often done so subtly that the victim doesn't realize what's happened until the applause has already been redirected, until their name is no longer associated with what they built, until someone else is celebrated for their vision, their genius, their story. Legacy theft doesn't require brilliance, it requires timing. The brilliance already happened. The theft comes later, when the stakes are higher, the lights are brighter, and the world is finally paying attention. And when they do, they won't remember who lit the match, only who stood beside the flame when it caught fire. Resource starvation. Resource starvation is control through deprivation. It is not about saying no outright. It's about saying, not yet, soon. Let me see what I can do, all while watching someone slowly unravel. It is the deliberate denial or delay of support, whether emotional, financial, informational, or logistical, until the target becomes so worn down, so stuck, so desperate, that they begin to rely on you completely. Not because they trust you, but because they have no other choice. This tactic is rooted in psychological erosion. At first, the target might be confident, capable, self-sufficient. But when their needs are repeatedly unmet, when every request is stalled, every lifeline is tangled in red tape, every form of help is on its way, but never arrives, their internal stability starts to crumble. They begin to question their own ability to function. And in that slow decline, the manipulator waits. What makes resource starvation so insidious is that it never looks like outright sabotage. The manipulator poses as the helper, the provider, the one who's doing their best under difficult circumstances. They might apologize profusely, offer excuses, blame systems, timing, or other people. But none of it is real. The goal isn't to help, it's to hollow out, to weaken, to trap. In toxic workplaces, this might look like withholding access to tools or information until the employee fails, making them look incompetent. In abusive relationships, it's the partner who never lets you have financial independence, never gives you space, never gives clarity, just enough to keep you dependent, but not enough to set you free. Even in families, a parent might deny emotional affirmation or critical support while pretending it's for the child's own good. Over time, the target stops asking. They shrink. They comply. And then comes the shift. The manipulator offers help. A little. Just enough. And the target, now emotionally or materially starved, accepts it like salvation. But that acceptance comes with a price. Loyalty, silence, obedience. Because the unspoken message has been carved deep. You don't survive without me. Resource starvation doesn't dominate through force. It conquers through slow, calculated neglect. And by the time the target realizes what's happened, they're already too exhausted to fight back. The indirect hit. The indirect hit is an assault launched sideways, quiet, precise, and deceptively distant. Instead of striking a person directly, you go after the people around them, their friends, their confidants, their team. You attack the structure that supports them, the relationships that legitimize them, the alliances that protect them. Because when you can't destroy someone head-on, or when doing so would expose you, you erode their credibility by poisoning the soil they grow in. This tactic thrives in environments where power is relational. No one rises alone. Influence is built on perception, trust, and the people who stand beside you. The indirect hit leverages this reality by targeting those connections, not with open conflict, but with whispers, doubts, and subtle sabotage. You might innocently mention that someone close to your target is unreliable, that they're saying things behind their back, that their loyalty might be questionable. Or you amplify a minor misstep, missed meetings, awkward comments, overlooked details, until the shadow falls on your target by proximity. It works because guilt by association is deeply ingrained in human psychology. We judge people by their circles. If their ally stumbles, we start to wonder if they're both unstable. If their partner lies, we question whether they were ever honest themselves. And the target may not even know where the fallout is coming from. All they feel is that the ground beneath them is shifting. People are colder. Trust is fading. Eyes are watching more closely. The most effective indirect hits are layered. You don't just attack one ally, you create a pattern. You quietly separate your target from their sources of support, making them look isolated, exposed, even suspicious. Eventually, they begin to flinch under pressure. They over-explain. They get defensive. They seem off. And when they finally falter, it confirms what you've engineered others to believe. You never had to say a word about them directly. You never had to lift a finger in confrontation. All you did was make their world smaller, seed doubt where there was once loyalty, and let their credibility collapse under the weight of relationships you slowly, methodically turn to ash. The target falls alone, never realizing it was their allies who were taken out first. Inflated threat. Inflated threat is fear alchemy, the deliberate magnification of danger to seize control, silence dissent, and justify extreme measures that would otherwise be unthinkable. It is the manipulation of perception, not by lying outright, but by stretching truths until they cast shadows much larger than reality. You don't have to fabricate the fire. You just need to blow enough smoke that people start choking on panic and forget to ask where the flames actually are. This tactic works because fear short-circuits rational thinking. When people believe they're under threat, socially, physically, financially, they become pliable. They stop questioning. They seek protection. They cling to strong voices and easy answers, even when those answers come wrapped in chains. The manipulator positions themselves as the only one who understands the full scale of the threat, the only one with the strength or foresight to act, and so they must be obeyed, for everyone's safety. It happens in governments, where leaders inflate external dangers to impose surveillance, censorship, or military action. It happens in corporate leadership, where executives warn of catastrophic losses to justify layoffs, restructures, or power consolidation. It happens in relationships, where one partner invents or distorts threats. They're all using you. The world's out to get us, to isolate the other and force dependency. The danger might be real in a small form, but it's exaggerated into something monstrous, overwhelming, and urgent. And urgency is the weapon's edge. Inflated threat doesn't allow time for discussion or alternatives. It thrives on immediacy. We don't have time to think. We must act now. In that panic, people surrender freedoms, question their instincts, and allow things they'd never tolerate in calmer moments. The manipulator watches it all unfold, the chaos they orchestrated now working as justification for their control. What makes this tactic so devastating is how easily it embeds itself in memory. Once fear has gripped someone, even after the threat is revealed to be overblown or entirely false, the emotional residue remains. The fear lingers, and so does the obedience. Inflated threat doesn't just gain power in the moment, it conditions future submission. Because once someone's learned to panic on command, they'll never fully stop listening to the voice that taught them how. Mock confession. Mock confession is deception dressed as honesty, a disarming tactic that cloaks manipulation in vulnerability. It's the calculated admission of a small, seemingly authentic flaw to divert suspicion from something far more dangerous. You confess a minor sin, a harmless mistake, a little misstep. And in doing so, you build the illusion of transparency, of trustworthiness. The truth becomes a decoy. The lie stays buried, untouched. This tactic exploits the human instinct to trust those who admit their faults. Confession feels real. It feels raw. We're trained to associate it with guilt, humility, growth. So when someone opens up, I can be disorganized. I overthink things. Sometimes I get too emotionally invested. We lean in. We feel closer. We let our guard down. But what we don't see is that this admission has been engineered. It's not the truth they fear. It's the truth they're hiding. The genius of the mock confession is in its balance. It must be believable enough to feel sincere, but harmless enough to avoid consequence. It needs to satisfy the listener's suspicion without actually giving them anything of substance. The manipulator knows what you're looking for, an opening, a crack. So they hand you one. Here, they say, here's my flaw. This is me being real. And you take it, relieved, convinced, distracted. Meanwhile, the real offense, the betrayal, the lie, the sabotage, remains untouched. It's buried beneath the warmth of faux honesty. And if you ever question them again, they'll remind you, I've always been upfront with you. Politicians use this tactic during scandals. A public apology for a lapse in judgment hides layers of unethical decisions. Corporate leaders admit poor communication to deflect from systemic exploitation. In personal relationships, abusers admit to not being perfect while continuing patterns of deep emotional harm. And it works, because people want to forgive. They want to believe they've heard the full story. The mock confession gives them just enough to believe they have. But it's bait, a spotlight on a cracked window, so you don't look for the hidden door. It's not designed to cleanse the soul. It's designed to protect the scheme. And most never realize they've been given the wrong confession until the real damage has already been done. The floating loyalty. The floating loyalty is allegiance without anchor, a strategy rooted not in conviction, but in calculation. It is the conscious choice to shift sides, alliances, and loyalties as often as needed to stay closest to the center of power. Morality, ideology, relationships, all are negotiable. The only constant is survival. The only goal is proximity to influence. This is not betrayal by impulse. It is betrayal by design. The person who employs floating loyalty learns early that permanence is a liability. That loyalty binds, and binding means limitation. So instead, they become fluid. They listen for changes in tone, read the room like a predator tracking the wind. As soon as power shifts, they shift too, effortlessly, shamelessly, often before anyone even notices what's changed. One day they're a trusted ally. The next, they're at the table of your enemy, nodding with the same smile they once gave you. To outsiders, they seem adaptable, pragmatic, maybe even visionary. But to those who've watched closely, there's a darker truth. This person stands for nothing but their own ascension. Their beliefs are costumes. Their friendships are tools. Their loyalty is always conditional, and the condition is power. In corporate circles, these are the employees who swear allegiance to a team or leader, only to jump ship the moment a promotion's on the horizon. In politics, they're the ones who switch parties or ideologies without shame, explaining it away as evolving views, when it's really just calculated repositioning. In relationships, they mirror whoever holds emotional dominance, aligning with strength, abandoning the weak, rewriting their own history in real time. The floating loyalty is hard to confront because it doesn't feel like betrayal until it's already done. They don't stab you in the back. They simply drift away when you're no longer useful, like fog vanishing with the morning sun. And when they return, if they return, they'll speak with familiarity, pretending nothing ever shifted, as if their devotion was never conditional, as if you imagined the distance. But the truth is clear. Their loyalty was never to you. It was to whoever stood higher. And if you find yourself above them now, beware, because they're smiling again and drifting your way. Leverage spillage. Leverage spillage is the art of the intentional slip. It's the tactic of accidentally revealing something that seems personal, confidential, or risky. Not to expose weakness, but to manufacture intimacy. On the surface, it looks like vulnerability. You drop a secret, a private thought, a story no one else is supposed to hear. But it's not your real secret. It's bait, carefully chosen, strategically timed, and deployed to trigger trust. People instinctively bond over shared vulnerability. When someone opens up, we feel honored, we feel chosen, and most importantly, we feel safe to open up in return. That's what leverage spillage is designed to trigger, a psychological mirroring effect. You show your cards, just a few, not enough to damage you, but enough to look raw, and the other person, feeling trusted, begins to really open up. They reveal things that are not rehearsed, not calculated. The exchange feels mutual, but it's not. Because you were never truly exposed. You just pretended to be. The secret you spill is never truly damaging. Maybe it's a past failure, a guilty pleasure, a mistake that paints you as human but still likable. You might even tell it in a hushed tone, glance around, say, "I shouldn't be telling you this." You simulate risk to create authenticity. And once your target buys into the illusion, they'll feel compelled to meet you at that level. That's when the real information starts pouring out. Fears, ambitions, insecurities, leverage. This tactic thrives in negotiations, politics, intelligence work, and manipulative relationships. A cunning executive might casually reveal internal company gossip to encourage a junior employee to talk. A manipulator in a relationship might share a story about being hurt before to fish for emotional triggers. And in every case, the initial spill is not a loss. It's an investment, a decoy secret to unlock something far more valuable. The beauty of leverage spillage is that it leaves no suspicion. The other person feels trusted. They believe the bond is real. They don't realize they've given away the keys to their psyche in exchange for a story that was never meant to stay hidden in the first place. And now, you hold the leverage, gift-wrapped in their own sense of closeness. The useful enemy. The useful enemy is the snake you feed in secret. Not to befriend, not to spare, but to use. It is the calculated act of propping up an adversary, supplying them with just enough oxygen to inflate their presence, their confidence, even their following, all while quietly plotting their collapse. You don't destroy them outright. You build them, guide them, let them grow loud and visible. Because the louder they get, the easier it is to point when the time comes and say, "Look at the threat." This tactic is rooted in one of the darkest truths of power. Sometimes you need a villain to make yourself look like a hero, or a fool to make yourself look like a genius, or a scapegoat to absorb the damage you're too smart to touch. So instead of eliminating your rival, you make them your tool. You leak them information you want exposed. You let them run wild with ideas you've already deemed doomed. You even fund their rise, through whispers, resources, quiet endorsements, knowing full well how and when you'll pull the rug. It's often used in politics, where a candidate secretly props up a more extreme opponent, betting the public will recoil and swing toward the safer alternative, you. It appears in corporate warfare, where a manager subtly supports a toxic rival just to let them burn out publicly in a failed campaign or scandal. Even in friendships and relationships, someone might encourage a person's worst traits, feed their bad habits, stoke their arrogance, only to step back and let them implode when it's most convenient. The beauty of the useful enemy is how clean your hands stay. You don't fight them. You let them fight themselves. And while they're distracted by the power you let them taste, they don't notice the trap forming beneath their feet. You gave them rope, and they tied their own noose. This tactic is not about mercy. It's about optics, about timing, about letting the enemy rise just high enough that their fall makes a statement. And when they crash, publicly, loudly, you step over the wreckage with your image polished, your role sanitized, your plan complete. They thought they were winning. They thought you were out of the way. But they were never a threat. They were a performance. And you were the director all along. Proximity surveillance. Proximity surveillance is betrayal disguised as friendship. It's the calculated act of getting close to someone, not out of genuine connection, but to observe, infiltrate, and gather information that can later be used against them. This isn't casual manipulation. This is espionage on a personal level. You become the trusted confidant, the sympathetic ear, the loyal ally. But you are there for one reason only: to listen with purpose. This tactic is built on emotional mimicry and strategic presence. You mirror the target's values, interests, humor. You show up when they're low, celebrate when they're high. You make them feel seen, understood, safe. And all the while, you're mapping their inner world: weaknesses, fears, triggers, secrets, routines. You're building a psychological file behind every conversation, every offhand comment, every impulsive rant they thought was safe to share. The genius of proximity surveillance is that it feels warm, intimate, earned. It's not invasive. It's welcomed. The target opens up not because they're careless, but because they want to. They trust you. You've built that trust meticulously, layer by layer. But that trust is not a reward. It's a weapon. Because the moment they give you something valuable, you store it, catalog it, and wait. You don't use it right away. That would expose the game. No, this tactic requires patience. Maybe weeks, maybe months. And when the time comes, when leverage is needed, when control must shift, When revenge is on the table, you strike. You reference something only someone close would know. You steer conversations with subtle reminders of what they've told you. Or worse, you leak what you've learned at the perfect moment and let the fallout destroy them. This method is common in toxic workplaces, manipulative relationships, and high-stakes social circles. A coworker who plays the supportive friend but feeds your missteps to upper management. A partner who encourages you to share your traumas only to weaponize them later. A friend who knows exactly how to humiliate you because they helped you heal. Proximity surveillance isn't about spying from afar. It's about getting close enough to touch their trust, then turning it into a knife. The betrayal cuts deeper, not because it was brutal, but because it came from the person they thought would never wield the blade. The naive saboteur. The naive saboteur is the smiling disaster, the well-meaning hurricane, the person who always seems to be trying their best, but somehow manages to leave chaos in their wake. They play the part of the clueless helper, the bumbling assistant, the "oops, I didn't realize" presence that slowly erodes structure, trust, and momentum. But it's not incompetence, it's strategy. The confusion is a mask, the clumsiness is a weapon, and the damage they cause is intentional. This tactic is brilliant because it's unprovable. When something breaks under their watch, they apologize. When deadlines are missed because of them, they nod with concern. When tension rises, they wring their hands and swear they're trying harder. They are never aggressive, never defiant, never openly oppositional. In fact, they're often overly apologetic, overly helpful, even likable. But underneath that innocence is a sharp mind calculating every delayed file, every miscommunicated message, every softly delivered misstep. The naive saboteur survives by flying under the radar. They don't seem dangerous. They seem overwhelmed, or a little forgetful, or just not cut out for high-pressure work. So instead of getting removed, they get accommodated. People lower their expectations. Others clean up their messes. And as the dysfunction grows, no one suspects the person who always seems just a little too confused to be held accountable. In office politics, this is the team member who accidentally CCs the wrong person on a sensitive email, who misplaces important documents, who forgets to mention a critical update in a meeting. In relationships, it's the partner who didn't know something would upset you, even though you've explained it a dozen times. They claim innocence, but they're listening, they're watching, and they know exactly which screws to loosen without anyone noticing the machine is about to fall apart. The beauty and danger of the naive saboteur is how disarming they are. While everyone's busy managing their clumsiness, they're quietly steering the outcome. And by the time people realize what's happened, it looks like a series of unfortunate accidents. No trail, no confrontation, just slow decay, delivered with a shrug, a smile, and the words, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." Echo amplification. Echo amplification is intellectual theft in disguise. A subtle, insidious tactic that turns someone else's idea into your spotlight. It doesn't involve stealing words verbatim or openly claiming credit. Instead, it's a matter of timing, tone, and volume. You wait. You listen. You hear someone offer a thought, maybe raw, maybe undeveloped, maybe too quiet to catch the room's full attention. Then you take it, dress it up, project it with confidence, and let the crowd believe it came from you. This tactic thrives in environments where visibility is currency. Meetings, brainstorming sessions, classrooms, group chats. Anywhere someone else's spark can be snatched before it ignites. You don't need to be first. You just need to be louder, more polished, more assertive. The original speaker may still be in the room, but it doesn't matter. Their voice was a whisper. Yours is the echo with a megaphone. Echo amplification isn't always malicious on the surface. Sometimes it's framed as support. Like she said earlier, but to take it further. Or, I think what he meant was, But in that moment, the shift occurs. The idea mutates into your version, your voice, your framing. And that's what sticks. It rewrites perception in real time. People remember who brought the idea to life, not who first birthed it in quiet. What makes this tactic especially devastating is how hard it is to call out. The original thinker risks sounding petty, defensive, or even paranoid if they object. "I just said that," feels weak against the confidence of someone who now owns the room. It's a theft so polished it's treated like evolution, not a hijacking, but an improvement. In group dynamics, echo amplification erodes trust. The quiet creatives stop contributing. The loud ones thrive. Over time, it silences innovation, replacing it with performance. In relationships, it becomes emotional mimicry, repeating your partner's ideas as if they were your own wisdom, slowly making them doubt the strength of their own voice. Echo amplification doesn't reward insight. It rewards presence. The power isn't in who thought of it first, but who the room believes said it best. And in that lie, legacies are rewritten. Status deflation. Status deflation is social warfare in its most refined form, a subtle but sharp tactic that undermines others not with confrontation, but with carefully chosen words designed to shrink them in the eyes of others. It is the deliberate use of lower status titles, nicknames, or diminutives to chip away at someone's authority, professionalism, or self-perception. On the surface, it seems harmless. A joke, a slip, a casual tone. But beneath it lies the real aim. Diminish, belittle, destabilize. Power lives in perception. Call someone doctor, and the room listens. Call them buddy, and the room relaxes. Replace director of operations with one of the admin folks, and suddenly, their influence evaporates. In just a few syllables, you've reframed who they are, stripped away their prestige, and altered how others see them, and how they start to see themselves. This tactic thrives in environments where status is currency. Boardrooms, social circles, politics, academia, family hierarchies. A rival manager might repeatedly call a female executive sweetheart or kiddo in meetings. A jealous peer may refer to someone as the assistant instead of their real title. A manipulative partner might stop using your name altogether, replacing it with something infantilizing or dismissive. My little mess, the emotional one. It chips away slowly, invisibly, and it works. The genius of status deflation lies in its ambiguity. When challenged, the manipulator shrugs. "I was just being friendly." Relax, it was a nickname. And if you react with offense, they weaponize your discomfort. "Wow, someone's sensitive today." This traps the victim in a double bind. Tolerate the disrespect, or risk being painted as overly emotional, egotistical, or insecure. But the damage is real. Over time, others begin to adopt the new labels. Respect erodes. Influence declines. The target may start second-guessing themselves, wondering why they no longer feel in control. And all of it traces back to the moment someone downgraded their status with a word. Status deflation doesn't shout. It whispers. It passes off humiliation as humor. It dresses sabotage in familiarity. And it leaves its mark not through violence, but through repetition. One name, one title, one moment at a time, until the person standing tall begins to quietly shrink. Social ejection. Social ejection is exile without blood. It's the invisible push out of the circle, the gradual poisoning of group perception until one person, the rival, the threat, the inconvenient presence, is no longer welcome. Not by force, not by accusation, but by consensus. It is the manipulation of collective trust, designed to isolate a target while making it look like they simply no longer fit. It begins with a whisper, a doubt, a story slightly tilted. "She's been acting different, haven't you noticed?" He's not really pulling his weight lately. You plant the seeds not of outrage, but of discomfort. You don't make the target hated, you make them awkward, misaligned, out of sync. And then you let silence do the work. One person pulls away, then another. Invitations stop arriving. Messages go unanswered. Meetings move without them. Eventually, they're no longer part of the conversation, and no one can quite say when it happened. This tactic is devastating because it works on our deepest fear, being rejected by the group. Humans are social animals, hardwired for belonging. Social ejection doesn't just strip someone of influence, it strips them of identity. They feel the shift. They feel the stares. They start second-guessing every word, every gesture. They become quieter, more isolated, easier to control or eliminate entirely. The group doesn't even realize they're complicit. They just follow the new rhythm, one where the target no longer exists. Social ejection happens in cliques, in corporate politics, in family dynamics. A coworker who suddenly becomes the problem. A friend who starts being left out because things feel off. A sibling who's quietly labeled difficult. And all it takes is a few nudges from someone behind the curtain, someone who wants them gone, but never has to say it out loud. There are no confrontations, no open hostility, just the slow erosion of presence. And by the time the target realizes what's happening, they're already standing outside the circle, wondering how they got there, while everyone else shrugs and says, "They just changed." And the orchestrator? They stay in the center, unchallenged, untouched, the architect of exile with not a single fingerprint left behind. Emotional baiting. Emotional baiting is psychological entrapment, a deliberate and cruel strategy designed to provoke, enrage, or destabilize someone just enough that they explode while you stay calm. It is the subtle push, the sly comment, the well-placed smirk, all engineered to trigger an emotional outburst that you can later use as proof. See? Look how irrational they are. It's not just manipulation, it's character assassination in slow motion. The brilliance of emotional baiting is that it's invisible to the casual observer. It often starts with something small, a dismissive tone, a backhanded compliment, a question laced with mock concern. "Are you okay? You seem a little off today." The baiter watches your expression, your posture, your breath. They nudge again. A pointed joke in front of others. A misunderstood comment that just happens to hit your deepest nerve. Their goal isn't to hurt you directly. Their goal is to get you to hurt yourself, publicly. Once you take the bait, once you raise your voice, show your anger, defend yourself emotionally, they sit back and become the victim. Calm, rational, innocent. While you look out of control, dramatic, unstable. People don't remember the pokes. They remember the explosion. And in that moment, your credibility cracks. Your authority weakens. Your image, carefully built over time, begins to dissolve under the weight of that one outburst. This tactic is often used in toxic workplaces, where a passive-aggressive coworker undermines you with subtle jabs until you snap in front of a superior. It appears in abusive relationships, where one partner constantly provokes the other behind closed doors, then plays the calm saint when the storm breaks. It even shows up in friendships and family dynamics, when someone is threatened by your strength and slowly chips away at it, daring you to react so they can point and say, "There it is, that's what I've been dealing with." Emotional baiting doesn't require force. It requires precision, patience, a cold understanding of your wounds, your triggers, your patterns. And the cruelest part? The more emotionally honest you are, the more human you are, the more likely you are to fall into it. Because emotional baiting is a game where authenticity becomes your weakness, and silence, detachment, and restraint become the only armor you have left. Reverse gratitude. Reverse gratitude is the psychological pickpocketing of emotional debt, so subtle, so twisted, that it turns your own act of generosity into something you owe them. It's a manipulation that flips the natural order of thankfulness on its head. You help them. You go out of your way. You give, sacrifice, show up, and somehow they walk away with your gratitude, not the other way around. It begins with emotional sleight of hand. The manipulator accepts your favor, your kindness, your time, and immediately repositions the narrative. They highlight the risk they took in accepting your help, the burden you might have carried, the trust they had to place in you. I wouldn't have let just anyone help with that. It really shows how close we are that I allowed you to be involved. Suddenly, your generosity becomes evidence of their openness, their vulnerability, their patience. You start to feel lucky, grateful, for being allowed to give. This tactic is especially insidious in close relationships, mentorships, and power dynamics. You might help someone through a crisis, only to hear later how difficult it was for them to let you in. You loan someone money, and they remind you how hard it was for them to accept help. You step up, and they act as if they were doing you the favor by letting you be useful. And before you know it, you're saying thank you for a role you should have been thanked for. Reverse gratitude thrives in emotional imbalance. The manipulator senses your need for approval, connection, or validation. They know you want to feel needed. So they twist the moment, make it seem like your giving wasn't selfless, but something they graciously allowed. They become the emotionally generous one. They frame themselves as tolerant, humble, even self-sacrificing for letting you in. And the result? You walk away with a debt you never signed up for. You question whether your help was even meaningful. You feel like you were the one who received something. That confusion weakens you. It softens your boundaries. It makes you more likely to give again, just to reclaim your own sense of worth. But you won't get that worth back. Because in their story, you were never the giver. Just the one lucky enough to be allowed to help. Plausible deniability. Plausible deniability is the cloak of the true puppet master, a calculated strategy that allows you to orchestrate chaos, manipulation, or even destruction without ever leaving your fingerprints behind. It is the art of influence without accountability, power without exposure. You pull the strings, but when the fallout comes, you're already standing 2 steps back, hands raised, voice calm. I didn't know. That wasn't my intention. I never said that directly. At its core, plausible deniability is about distance. Not physical distance, but emotional, verbal, strategic distance from the outcome you engineered. You speak in suggestions, not commands. You give options, not instructions. You express concerns, not accusations. And you surround yourself with enough layers, people, procedures, ambiguity, that when things go wrong, no one can tie the mess directly to you. You didn't push the button. You just asked the question that made someone else think it was time to press it. This tactic thrives in politics, in leadership, in corporate games of thrones. A senior executive hints that certain results would be unacceptable, then watches a subordinate bend the rules to meet them. A politician speaks in vague dog whistles that stir public outrage, then denies responsibility when violence follows. Even in personal dynamics, someone might say, "Do what you think is best," knowing full well what the wrong choice is, and ready to punish it without ever claiming they asked for something different. The power of plausible deniability lies in how clean it keeps your image. To outsiders, you're reasonable, responsible, even wise. The chaos beneath you is dismissed as miscommunication or bad luck. But to those inside the web, it's clear. You knew. You meant for this to happen. You just made sure no one could prove it. It's a tactic that rewards subtlety. You must speak in riddles, move through shadows, plant ideas instead of commands. And above all, you must surround yourself with buffers, people who will carry out your intent without ever hearing it spoken aloud. So when the spotlight turns, you're never in it. You're watching from the edge, untouched, while someone else takes the fall for what was always your plan. Plausible deniability is the perfect shield, not because you're innocent, but because you look like you are. Fake consensus. Fake consensus is the illusion of agreement, carefully constructed, strategically weaponized, and used to make resistance feel not just foolish, but isolating. It's the manipulation of social proof, engineered to convince a person or group that everyone else already agrees with a decision, idea, or belief. And if everyone else agrees, who are you to stand in the way? This tactic works because humans are tribal by nature. We fear rejection more than we fear being wrong. When we believe we're the only one holding out, the pressure to conform becomes suffocating. So the manipulator creates that pressure, not through persuasion, but through perception. It starts with suggestion, often subtle. Most people on the team are already on board. I've spoken to a few others, and they're all aligned. Nobody else had an issue with this. These phrases are rarely backed with evidence, and they don't have to be. All they need to do is plant the seed that you are the last one standing. Suddenly, your voice feels smaller. Your gut instinct feels like a liability. You don't want to be that person, the lone dissenter, the difficult one, the outsider. Fake consensus is a favorite tool in group manipulation. A manager might imply that the whole team has accepted a controversial policy to push it through unchallenged. A political strategist might use staged applause, fake polls, or paid crowds to simulate mass support. Even in friendships or families, someone might claim, "Everyone agrees," to silence a sibling or partner. But the crowd isn't real. It's a ghost army, constructed entirely to corral the target into surrender. The genius of this tactic lies in its invisibility. You rarely get a chance to verify the consensus. The names are vague. The support is implied. The group is faceless, but overwhelming. And once the idea takes hold that you're outnumbered, you begin to negotiate not with reason, but with fear of exclusion. Fake consensus doesn't change your mind. It changes your behavior. It nudges you into silence, submission, or reluctant approval, not because you agree, but because you no longer trust your right to disagree. And that's how power multiplies. Not through truth, but through the illusion that truth already belongs to everyone else. Opportunistic morality. Opportunistic morality is virtue worn like a mask, slipped on when convenient, discarded when not. It is the act of presenting yourself as principled, ethical, even righteous, but only when that righteousness serves your goals. It's not about values, it's about leverage. The moral high ground is treated not as a place to stand, but as a tool to climb higher, silence opposition, or cover your own ambition in the soft light of doing the right thing. This tactic is especially dangerous because it wears the disguise of integrity. It cloaks self-interest in noble language. The manipulator speaks passionately about fairness, equality, or accountability, but only when those causes serve their advantage. They demand transparency from others, yet guard their own secrets fiercely. They preach loyalty, yet abandon allies the moment it's no longer politically useful. They take moral stances not because they believe in them, but because they know morality is persuasive. It shuts people down. It shuts people up. People instinctively defer to those who seem ethical. We trust the principled voice in the room. So when someone uses that trust as a smokescreen, when they hold themselves up as the moral compass while quietly steering the ship toward personal gain, they gain disproportionate influence. Their criticisms sting more. Their praise means more. And their hypocrisy is harder to see because we don't want to see it. In politics, this is the leader who rails against corruption until it's their own hands in the cookie jar. In the workplace, it's the employee who champions teamwork until competition threatens their status. In relationships, it's the partner who talks about honesty, but only when they're on the receiving end of the truth. The moment principles require sacrifice, they vanish. Opportunistic morality weaponizes guilt. If you oppose the manipulator, they paint you as unethical. If you challenge them, you're the problem. It creates a psychological trap. To resist them feels like resisting the very idea of goodness. So most people stay quiet. They comply. They nod along while the mask stays on, smiling, spotless. But underneath, it's all calculation. Morality to them isn't a compass. It's a costume, and they wear it only when the cameras are rolling. The loyalty leak. The loyalty leak is a psychological landmine, a trap set with whispers instead of wires, designed not to destroy outright, but to expose. It's the calculated release of a rumor, an accusation, a planted suspicion about someone's loyalty, not to ruin them, but to see who runs, who stays, and who shifts uncomfortably in the shadows. It's not about what's true, it's about what the rumor reveals. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its indirectness. You don't confront anyone. You don't accuse anyone directly. Instead, you seed doubt. You tell one or two people that someone, no names, maybe a hint, isn't fully committed. That someone's talking behind your back. That someone's considering switching sides. And then you watch, closely. The room shifts. Conversations change. Eyes dart differently. Those loyal to you will come forward, defend you, inform you. Those who are unsure will hesitate, stay quiet, or even subtly distance themselves. And those who are truly disloyal? They'll panic, they'll overreact. They'll try to cover tracks that haven't even been traced yet. You didn't need proof before, but now you have behavior, and behavior doesn't lie. In power structures, political campaigns, corporate hierarchies, tight-knit social groups, this tactic is used to test the foundation without shaking the entire structure. Loyalty is a currency, and the loyalty leak is how you check the weight of the coins. It creates a pressure that forces hidden alliances into the open. Because when people feel like betrayal is already suspected, they either fight harder to appear loyal, or reveal their true allegiance under the weight of paranoia. The danger for the target is that there's no clean defense. You can't argue with a whisper. You can't prove a negative. The more you deny, the more suspicious you look. The loyalty leak doesn't require a lie to be believed. It only requires enough silence to echo. And once the information spreads, the manipulator never has to act. The group does it for them. Trust erodes. Walls form. A wedge drives in. And from the sidelines, the one who planted the rumor watches loyalties realign, not by force, but by fear. That's the trap, a truthless rumor that reveals the truth. Benevolent blackmail. Benevolent blackmail is generosity with strings, help offered with a smile, wrapped in kindness, but tethered to an invisible contract. It's the kind of support that feels like a lifeline at first, only to reveal itself later as a leash. On the surface, it looks like compassion. Someone steps in during your moment of weakness, rescues you from a tight spot, gives you time, money, influence, or protection. They don't ask for anything, yet. But the expectation is there, unspoken but unmistakable. You owe me now. This tactic thrives because it exploits both gratitude and guilt. When someone helps you in a vulnerable moment, you feel indebted. That's natural. That's human. But the manipulator counts on that reaction. They don't give because they want to lift you. They give so you'll lean on them. So you'll remember. So when the day comes that they need something, your silence, your loyalty, your vote, your compromise, you'll hesitate before saying no. Not because it's right, but because how could you refuse the person who helped you when no one else did? Benevolent blackmail doesn't come with threats. It doesn't need to. The threat is internal. It whispers through your own conscience. They've done so much for me. I'd be nothing without them. I can't just walk away. The manipulator never has to raise their voice. They just raise an eyebrow. Let the silence speak. Let the memory of your need play on loop. Every favor they did for you becomes currency. Every gesture becomes leverage. In workplaces, it's the mentor who gave you your first break and now expects unspoken loyalty, even as they cross lines. In relationships, it's the partner who reminds you of everything they've put up with when they want you to stay silent. In family, it's the parent who helped you out of crisis and now controls your choices with quiet guilt. What makes benevolent blackmail so effective is that you feel like the bad person for resisting. The trap isn't in the help itself. It's in the emotional debt it creates, an obligation that feels moral but is actually manipulative. Because when kindness is used as a weapon, gratitude becomes a cage, and saying no feels like betrayal, even when it's the only way to be free. The blame echo. The blame echo is the whisper that becomes a chorus, the art of softly, repeatedly planting doubt until it no longer sounds like suspicion, but truth. It's a psychological erosion technique, subtle and persistent, where blame is never shouted or accused outright, but echoed, gently, consistently, until it's absorbed by the group, and worst of all, by the target themselves. It begins with small, almost innocent comments. "She seems a little off lately, don't you think?" "I don't know if he's handling things the way he used to." "I'm sure it's nothing, but have you noticed how often mistakes seem to come from their side?" These aren't accusations. They're seeds, casually dropped into conversations, framed as concern, curiosity, or observation. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you outright. They just need to linger in your mind. The next time something goes wrong, the echo gets louder. The pattern starts to form, not in reality, but in perception. And perception is reality in influence. What makes the blame echo so dangerous is how invisible it is. The manipulator stays clean. They're not attacking. They're noticing. They're just worried. Meanwhile, others begin to repeat the narrative without even realizing they're doing it. One person raises a doubt. Another agrees. Soon, the entire group subtly shifts its view. The target is now seen as unreliable, careless, too emotional, not a team player, whatever the whisper was crafted to suggest. The most sinister effect? The target begins to believe it too. They start second-guessing themselves, apologizing more, shrinking back. They internalize the doubts echoed around them until their behavior begins to reflect the blame they were never guilty of to begin with. That's when the manipulator wins, not when others accuse the target, but when the target starts to accuse themselves. This tactic is a favorite among power players who want to eliminate competition without open conflict. No fight, no confrontation, just a slow, suffocating fog of suspicion that changes how someone is seen and how they see themselves. And when the target finally falls, quietly excluded, quietly demoted, quietly dismissed, it doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like inevitability. The echo did its job. It doesn't have to be loud. It just has to keep going. Vicarious sabotage. Vicarious sabotage is power at a distance, manipulation by proxy. It's the cold, calculated tactic of orchestrating destruction without ever laying a finger on the target yourself. Instead, you use someone else to do the damage, a pawn, a puppet, an independent actor who carries out the sabotage while you remain safely in the shadows. Your hands stay clean. Your name stays out of it. But the ruin they leave behind? That's yours, by design. This strategy thrives on misdirection. You whisper a half-truth into someone's ear. You fuel their resentment. You offer a suggestion that sounds innocent. It's just something to think about. You leak just enough information, stir just enough suspicion, drop just enough venom to ignite action in someone emotionally unstable, insecure, or already on edge. Then you step back and watch. The damage they cause, whether it's a betrayal, a blunder, or a public explosion, looks like their decision, their failure, their fault. You can even feign concern when it happens. Offer sympathy, Shake your head. I didn't think they'd go that far. You look like a bystander, even a voice of reason, while your rival's world crumbles under a blow you set in motion. This tactic is devastating because it hides its source. The person being sabotaged never sees you coming. They're busy fighting the wrong enemy, blaming the visible attacker, while the real architect, you, stays untouched, unnoticed, and several moves ahead. And if anyone suspects your involvement, you have layers of plausible deniability. They made their own decisions. I never told them to do that. You didn't ask for sabotage. You simply created the conditions where it was inevitable. Vicarious sabotage thrives in environments thick with tension. Corporate hierarchies, political rivalries, toxic teams, fractured families. It allows you to destabilize a threat without confrontation, to poison reputations without accusation, to win a war without ever appearing on the battlefield. It is the quiet cruelty of letting others burn while you bask in the glow of their failure. And the most dangerous part? Your target may never realize who truly hurt them. They'll be too busy fighting the wrong fire, while you light the next match from a distance. Ghosting the threat. Ghosting the threat is silence sharpened into a weapon, a quiet, calculated strategy to suffocate momentum without saying a single word. It's the act of deliberately ignoring a rising rival, not out of indifference, but with cold intent, to unnerve, to destabilize, to make them doubt their own significance. You see their potential, you recognize their ambition, but instead of confronting or challenging them, you do something far more devastating. You pretend they don't exist. In a world obsessed with recognition, silence is punishment. When someone is striving, speaking up, leading projects, gaining attention, and you respond with nothing, no feedback, no reaction, no acknowledgement, it chips away at their psyche. They begin to spiral inward. Am I doing something wrong? Why aren't they responding? Why doesn't anyone notice me? Their energy shifts from growth to self-questioning. They lose steam, not from failure, but from being unseen. This tactic is especially lethal in environments where validation is power. In offices, a manager might ghost an up-and-coming employee who's becoming too visible, ignoring their emails, skipping their contributions in meetings, overlooking them for credit or inclusion. In social circles, it's pretending not to hear when someone speaks, never responding to their ideas, letting their achievements pass without comment. On social media, it's deliberate non-engagement, a silence that echoes louder than any critique. The brilliance of ghosting the threat is that it rarely triggers alarm. There's no confrontation to point to, no insult to recall, just a persistent absence that becomes deafening. It isolates the target while preserving the manipulator's image of calm neutrality. And if the rival dares to bring it up, they risk sounding paranoid, insecure, or desperate. What are you talking about? I've just been busy. But make no mistake, this is not absence by accident. It's a suffocation strategy. When someone is rising too fast, sometimes the most effective way to stop them isn't to oppose them, but to starve them of visibility, to deny them the mirror of acknowledgement. Because without reflection, even the most confident person starts to wonder if they ever stood out at all. Ghosting the threat isn't passive. It's a psychological chokehold. And the cruelest part? They never see the hands around their neck, just the silence, and the slow, hollow ache of being forgotten. Status mirage. Status mirage is illusion engineered into influence. It is the deliberate performance of power, the art of appearing more connected, more important, more untouchable than you actually are, until perception alone becomes your greatest weapon. In a world that often believes what it sees before it questions what's true, the one who looks like they hold power often gets treated as if they do. And that illusion is where the mirage lives. The tactic is simple, but devastatingly effective. You drop names, but never too directly. You allude to meetings, partnerships, relationships with influential people. You show up dressed one level above the room. You speak with the authority of someone who's in the loop, even if you're barely on the edge. You keep your connections vague, your affiliations just ambiguous enough to let others fill in the blanks. And they will. People project power onto confidence. They assume that presence means status, that silence means depth, that exclusivity means importance. You don't have to be important. You just have to make them wonder if you are. This strategy thrives in environments obsessed with hierarchy, corporate boardrooms, elite social circles, high-stakes negotiations. When others perceive you as plugged in, they hesitate to challenge you. They defer. They try to align with you. And in doing so, they give you the very power you were pretending to have. The brilliance of the status mirage is that it feeds itself. The more people treat you like you're powerful, the more access you get. The more access you get, the more proof you can display. A picture at an event. A quote in the right conversation. A casual mention of someone who once shook your hand. People rarely question those who seem too far above them. The higher you appear, the less scrutiny you face. But the danger, for others, is how quickly this illusion becomes reality. Because once people start treating you like a gatekeeper, a leader, a figure of influence, you become one. Not because of truth, but because of belief. Status mirage doesn't require money, title, or real connections. It just requires confidence, timing, and the courage to walk into the room as if the world already knows your name, even if it doesn't. Yet. False urgency. False urgency is pressure with a ticking clock, but the clock is a lie. It's the fabrication of a deadline, a time limit, a looming consequence designed to force action before clarity, caution, or resistance can take hold. It's not about speed, it's about control. Because when people believe time is running out, they panic. And panicked minds are easier to push, manipulate, and own. The manipulator creates an artificial sense of now. We need this by end of day. If we don't move immediately, we'll lose the opportunity. They're expecting an answer within the hour. None of it is real. There's no pressure from above. No threat waiting behind the curtain. But no one stops to question it. Because urgency scrambles logic. It hijacks focus. It drowns out the voice that says, "Wait. Let's think this through." This tactic is brutally effective in business, negotiations, and high-stakes relationships. A boss who wants agreement on a shady deal might insist there's no time for a second opinion. A manipulative partner might claim, "You need to decide right now or it's over," pushing emotional decisions before reason can catch up. Even marketers do it. Only 3 left in stock. Offer expires in 1 hour. Whether the product is an idea, a demand, or a relationship, false urgency turns hesitation into surrender. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its ability to make people act against their own best interest. It overrides the natural instinct to pause and evaluate. Under pressure, people sign contracts they don't read, agree to terms they don't like, or make confessions they later regret, just to relieve the anxiety of the moment. Because that's what false urgency exploits. Not time, but stress. And when the deadline passes, there's no fallout, no consequence. Just a manipulator who now has what they wanted, and a target left wondering why they felt so rushed. But by then, the deal is done. The power has shifted. False urgency doesn't shout. It whispers in the back of your mind, "Hurry, or you'll lose everything." It feeds your fear of missing out, of disappointing, of being too late. And in chasing that clock, you never realize it was fake all along. The only thing real was your reaction. Information hoarding. Information hoarding is domination by silence. It is the intentional withholding of knowledge, key facts, updates, opportunities, or even minor details, not out of forgetfulness, but as a form of leverage. It is the belief that knowing more means controlling more, and the fewer people who know what you know, the more they depend on you to navigate the world you've quietly rigged in your favor. The hoarder is not loud. They are not confrontational. They are strategic. They smile while saying nothing, nod while offering only fragments, and make others believe they're informed, when in truth, they've been left blind. Every withheld email, every closed-door meeting, every quiet correction that never reaches the right ears, it all builds an invisible power structure where one person holds the map, and everyone else is guessing at the terrain. In workplaces, information hoarders are the ones who sit on updates that could save hours of work or delay sharing critical feedback until after a deadline passes, only to step in and save the day. In relationships, they withhold truths, feelings, or context to maintain the upper hand. In politics or leadership, they control narratives by restricting access, deciding who knows what, when, and how much. This tactic works because people assume that information flows honestly. Most don't think to question what they haven't been told. They make decisions based on partial truths, unaware they've been set up to fail, or to depend entirely on the person who holds the missing pieces. The information hoarder thrives in ambiguity. They present themselves as in the know, the person you have to consult before acting. And over time, people stop trying to figure things out on their own. They wait, they ask, they yield. Not because they trust the hoarder, but because they no longer trust themselves to act without their approval. What makes this tactic so suffocating is its invisibility. You don't notice what's missing until something goes wrong, a missed opportunity, a public mistake, and by then, the hoarder is already positioning themselves as the one who could have helped, if only you'd come to them sooner. But that was always the point. Knowledge wasn't power. Isolation was, and they built it, one withheld truth at a time. The distraction play. The distraction play is misdirection in its purest form. The act of pulling all eyes toward a lesser problem so that the real one, the one that matters, slips by unnoticed. It's not about solving anything. It's about managing perception. You create noise, stir emotion, ignite concern around something almost important, just enough to consume time, energy, and outrage. Meanwhile, behind that smokescreen, the true move is made. This tactic thrives in high-pressure environments where attention is currency. A leader might provoke a minor scandal, an insensitive remark, a leaked memo, knowing it will dominate headlines, while a massive policy change quietly gets pushed through the back door. A colleague may start a loud argument over scheduling or resources to divert attention from the fact they've been siphoning credit or bending rules. Even in relationships, one partner might manufacture drama, jealousy, suspicion, petty grievances, just to avoid accountability for something deeper, something unforgivable. The genius of the distraction play is its subtle math. The false issue must be real enough to warrant attention, but not so real that it becomes uncontrollable. It has to burn bright but fast. A fire you can point to, not one you have to put out. And while people are busy fixing what they think is the problem, the actual damage, reputation manipulation, ethical breaches, betrayal, goes unchallenged. Distraction steals energy. It breaks focus. It forces people to spend their credibility on the wrong fight. By the time they realize the truth, they've already exhausted their influence on the decoy. And that's what the manipulator is counting on, that you'll waste your strength battling shadows. The most dangerous part? It works even better when the manipulator pretends to oppose the distraction. Let's not focus on this right now, they say, while secretly feeding it fuel. Or, I hate that this is getting so much attention, while making sure it stays just loud enough to keep you occupied. And when the real betrayal is finally uncovered, it feels anticlimactic, too late, drowned in fatigue. The outrage has already been spent. The moment for action has passed, because that's the power of the distraction play. It doesn't just hide the truth. It makes sure you're too tired to do anything about it when you finally see it. Scapegoat. Grooming. Scapegoat grooming is betrayal in slow motion, the systematic conditioning of someone to carry the weight of blame for failures they didn't cause, decisions they didn't make, and consequences they couldn't prevent. It is not a single act of accusation. It's a process. A slow, calculated drip of doubt, subtle delegations, and planted perceptions that quietly lead a person into the role of the guilty party, long before the actual blame is ever spoken aloud. It begins innocently. A missed detail is casually pinned on them. A conversation is misremembered to make them the one who misunderstood. They're left off emails, excluded from meetings, then later asked, "Why didn't you know?" These moments seem small, easy to shrug off, but they are intentional. Each one chips away at credibility, confidence, and external trust. Over time, coworkers, friends, or family members begin to associate this person with unreliability, confusion, or error, and they begin to internalize it too. That's what makes scapegoat grooming so cruel. It doesn't just manipulate how others see the target. It manipulates how the target sees themselves. They start apologizing for things they didn't do. They over-explain, over-defend, overcompensate. They become anxious in group settings, afraid to speak up, afraid to make waves. And the groomer sits comfortably nearby, often playing the role of mentor, supporter, even protector, while quietly setting up the fall. This tactic thrives in hierarchical systems, workplaces, families, even friend groups. Anywhere there's a power dynamic and a fear of accountability, scapegoat grooming offers an easy exit for the true saboteur. The groomer appears competent because someone else looks confused. They seem composed because someone else is panicking. They appear trustworthy because they've made sure someone else seems like a constant problem. And when the moment finally comes, when the major failure hits, when the finger must be pointed, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels inevitable. Everyone already believes the scapegoat is the weak link. They've been conditioned to. Even the scapegoat might agree. But this wasn't fate. It was design. Every dropped hint, every silent exclusion, every deflected glance was a brick in a prison built for someone else. And the worst part? They may never know who the architect was, only that the world now sees them as the problem, and they can't remember when that started. Enforced dependency. Enforced dependency is control disguised as support, a deliberate strategy of providing just enough help, access, or privilege to make someone believe they're being empowered, while quietly ensuring they can't survive without you. It's not about generosity, it's about leverage. The more someone depends on your resources, your approval, your connections, your money, your knowledge, the less they resist, the less they question, the less they leave. This tactic doesn't build strength. It builds reliance. The manipulator offers tools, but not instruction, solutions, but not independence. They insert themselves into every process, every opportunity, until they become the gateway to everything the target wants or needs. Want a raise? It goes through them. Want information? They have the files. Want permission, validation, direction? They're the one who knows best. And slowly, invisibly, the target's autonomy erodes. In professional environments, this might look like a manager who never trains others fully, keeping all critical access under their control, so the team can't function without them. In relationships, it's the partner who handles the finances, the passwords, the bookings, making it seem like kindness while building a cage. In friendships, it's the person who's always there for you, because they've subtly isolated you from everyone else. What makes enforced dependency so insidious is how grateful it can make the victim feel. They've done so much for me. I don't know how I'd manage without them. That's the trap. It doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like support. Until one day, you want to move, decide, breathe, without them. And you realize you can't. The manipulator will often use your own dependency to guilt you. If you push back, they'll remind you of all they've done. After everything I've given you, you wouldn't be here without me. And they're right, because that was the plan all along. Dependency isn't an accident. It's a prison built with favors instead of bars. True power doesn't make others stronger. It makes them need you just enough to never walk away. That's enforced dependency. And once you're in it, escape doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like betrayal, which is exactly how they want you to feel. Helpless, grateful, trapped. Strategic crying wolf. Strategic crying wolf is the weaponization of urgency, a manipulation of fear and attention that turns real problems into background noise. It's not an accident or a misunderstanding. It's a calculated tactic of sounding the alarm too often, too loudly, and often for trivial or fabricated threats until everyone stops listening. And that's the point. The goal isn't to solve anything. The goal is to desensitize, to drain people's emotional energy, to erode their trust in urgency itself, so that when a real crisis comes, no one reacts, no one helps, no one even looks up. The manipulator begins by raising red flags constantly. We're about to lose everything. They're lying to us. This is an emergency. At first, people respond. They rally. They act. But soon, they notice a pattern. The disasters don't materialize. The threats were exaggerated. The panic was unnecessary. The alarm was false. And slowly, their response weakens. Their instincts numb. They stop taking the warning seriously. That's when the manipulator makes their move. Because once people have stopped responding, anything can happen. Real dangers, whether caused by the manipulator or merely inconvenient truths, go unchallenged. The group has been trained to dismiss them. It's probably nothing. We've heard this before. And so, critical issues slip by unaddressed. Accountability fades. Power grows in the silence. This tactic is particularly dangerous in leadership, politics, activism, and relationships. A toxic partner may constantly threaten breakups or claim emotional crisis to maintain control. A corrupt manager might issue urgent demands weekly, creating constant anxiety that keeps employees off balance. A leader may exaggerate threats to distract from scandal or failure. Each false alarm serves a dual purpose: dominate attention now and numb resistance later. Strategic crying wolf doesn't just waste people's time. It rewires their instincts. It makes them question their own reactions. It conditions them to ignore urgency, even when it's justified. And the manipulator knows this, counts on it. They flood the system with noise, not because it's true, but because they know no one can stay alert forever. By the time the real danger arrives, no one believes it. And the manipulator, standing calmly in the wreckage, says with quiet cruelty, "I warned you." The social auditor. The social auditor is the quiet observer in the room, the one who smiles, nods, listens, and seems harmless, even friendly. But behind their calm demeanor is a razor-sharp intention: to scan every relationship, every dynamic, every unspoken tension, and take notes. They aren't participating to belong. They're auditing to exploit. Every glance, every silence, every emotional shift is data. And they're building a map, not of the room, but of who controls it. This tactic is manipulation in its earliest, purest form. Information gathering. The social auditor doesn't strike immediately. They collect. They ask gentle questions that seem casual. So who really makes the decisions around here? You and her seem close, huh? Do they always act like that when he's around? These aren't observations. They're probes, designed to reveal fractures, alliances, rivalries, insecurities. Every answer adds a thread to the web. What makes this tactic so unnerving is its invisibility. The social auditor never looks dangerous. They rarely even speak much. They let others talk. They let others show their cards. Because most people are too busy trying to be seen or heard to realize they're being studied. That's when the auditor strikes, not with force, but with precision. They pit quiet rivals against each other. They leak information where it will do the most harm. They manipulate one person's fear to influence another's loyalty, all without ever appearing to have done anything at all. In corporate circles, this is the employee who never seems to take sides, but always knows which side will win. In social groups, it's the friend who everyone talks to, but no one fully trusts, who always seems to know the gossip first. In relationships, it's the partner who tracks every conversation, every mood, every shift in energy, not to understand you, but to control the narrative later. The social auditor doesn't want attention. They want leverage. They don't speak to bond. They speak to log. And by the time you realize you've been studied, categorized, and filed under useful or weak, they've already pulled a string behind the scenes that shifts everything. They aren't interested in the group. They're interested in the fault lines running beneath it. And they're just waiting for the right moment to crack them open. Emotional misdirection. Emotional misdirection is psychological sleight of hand, the art of hijacking someone's emotions to steer them away from rational thought. It's not about offering facts or logic. It's about overwhelming them with feeling so that their critical thinking shuts down and their choices become impulsive, fogged by intensity. The manipulator doesn't need to win the argument. They just need to change the emotional temperature in the room, and suddenly, truth no longer matters. This tactic is devastatingly effective because emotion, not logic, drives most human behavior. People like to believe they make rational choices, but in reality, decisions are often rooted in fear, guilt, shame, pride, love, anger. The emotional misdirector knows this and weaponizes it. Instead of defending their actions, they deflect with sentiment. Confront them with facts, and they respond with tears. Catch them in a lie, and they accuse you of betrayal. Challenge their authority, and they unleash righteous fury. Now you're no longer focused on what they did. You're trying to navigate how you feel about it. Suddenly, you're on the defensive. You're explaining your tone, your approach, your timing. The original issue is buried beneath a wave of emotional chaos. And that's exactly the point. When someone is crying, yelling, guilt-tripping, or playing the victim, logic fades. People stop asking, "What happened?" and start asking, "How do we fix this emotion?" In relationships, this tactic looks like a partner turning every disagreement into a sobbing breakdown. In family dynamics, it's the parent who erupts in anger or despair whenever questioned, ensuring they're never truly held accountable. In business or politics, it's the leader who shifts from scandal to outrage, or sorrow, or deflection. How dare you attack me after everything I've done? What makes emotional misdirection so hard to counter is that it feels real. The emotions displayed may not be fake, they may be genuine, but strategically timed and amplified to confuse and disarm. It's not always lying. Sometimes it's losing control on purpose. This tactic isn't about getting to the truth. It's about burying it under noise, under heat, under tears. Because if you're too busy feeling, you're not thinking. And if you're not thinking, you're not resisting. You're just reacting. And they've already won. Counterfeit humility. Counterfeit humility is the performance of modesty with the intention of manipulation, not to uplift others, but to lower their defenses. It is the calculated act of appearing self-deprecating, reserved, or unimpressed with one's own power in order to invite trust, comfort, and lowered suspicion. But behind the humble smile and softly spoken disclaimers is a mind that knows exactly how powerful it is, and how to use your disarmed state against you. This tactic works because we are conditioned to relax around humility. When someone appears humble, we interpret it as a signal of safety. No ego, no threat, no games. So we open up. We stop posturing. We reveal insecurities, weaknesses, real opinions. We even begin to lift them up, offering reassurance, praise, support, never realizing we're placing them in a higher position than they ever had to ask for. Counterfeit humility often sounds like, "I'm probably not the best person to say this, but," or, "I still have so much to learn, but here's what I've seen," or, "Honestly, I just got lucky." These phrases lull others into thinking the speaker is on equal footing, when in reality, they've already taken control of the room. Because by pretending to step back, they're actually stepping above the fray, watching, gathering, steering without resistance. In leadership, this looks like the executive who claims to be just part of the team, while subtly dominating every decision. In social dynamics, it's the person who deflects praise constantly, yet curates their image so carefully that admiration flows anyway. In manipulation-heavy relationships, it's the partner who never brags, never commands, but always ends up getting their way because they seem so reasonable, so reluctant, so pure. The most dangerous thing about counterfeit humility is that it flips suspicion into admiration. People don't just trust the humble manipulator, they protect them, they defend them, they push back on anyone who dares to question their motives, because they're not like that. But they are. They just wear sincerity like armor, until it's time to strike. And when they do, it's not dramatic. It's quiet. You agree to something. You let something slide. You tell them something you wouldn't tell anyone else, because you believed they didn't want power. That was the illusion. They wanted all of it. They just knew how to ask without asking. Reverse isolation. Reverse isolation is control through closeness, a psychological pressure cooker disguised as affection, support, or attentiveness. It's the tactic of flooding someone with constant attention, presence, and surveillance until they feel smothered, hyper-aware, and eventually paralyzed. Unlike traditional isolation, which cuts a person off from others, reverse isolation traps them in a spotlight. They're never alone, but they're never free either. It begins with an intense presence. The manipulator checks in constantly, always wants to talk, always wants to just be there. They insert themselves into every space, your texts, your schedule, your conversations, your decisions. At first, it might feel like love, loyalty, or friendship. You might even feel lucky. They care so much. But soon, that caring begins to feel heavy. The walls start to close in, and the message behind the closeness becomes unmistakable. We see you. We're watching. You don't get to move without us knowing. This tactic is especially insidious because it looks like connection. On the outside, others might admire the relationship. They're so involved, people will say. They're always there for you. But inside, the target feels constantly observed, constantly evaluated, constantly on edge. Privacy disappears. Space becomes a luxury. And the person begins to self-censor. Not because they were told to, but because they've learned they're never truly alone. In toxic relationships, this manifests as a partner who insists on constant check-ins, shows up uninvited, or monitors social media obsessively, then calls it love. In controlling work environments, it's the boss who hovers, micromanages, or just wants to help at every step, ensuring you can't breathe without their input. In cult-like groups, it's the enforced closeness, every hour accounted for, every action watched, that keeps people compliant. The genius of reverse isolation is that it turns attention into a cage. There are no locked doors, no threats, just eyes. Constant, watching eyes. And over time, the target doesn't just feel suffocated. They begin to forget who they were when they weren't being watched. Because when every move you make is seen, questioned, or praised, you stop moving freely. You stop being. And the person who put you under that light? They never had to lock you in. They just made sure you never had a shadow to step into again. False flag assistance. False flag assistance is the poison wrapped in kindness, the sinister tactic of offering help that appears generous, supportive, even life-saving, while planting the seeds of long-term damage beneath the surface. It's not about refusing aid. It's about delivering it in a way that disarms, delays, or disables. You make the target believe they're being lifted up, when in fact, you're tightening the grip around their future. This manipulation begins with timing. You offer help at just the right moment, when they're overwhelmed, exposed, desperate. You step in like a savior. Let me take care of it for you. You don't need to worry about this. I've got you. But the help comes with hidden flaws. Maybe the solution is too convenient, encouraging dependency. Maybe it sabotages their credibility, positioning you as the true mastermind. Maybe it creates obligations they'll never fully repay. You're not solving their problem. You're disguising it and tying it to your name. This is how enemies masquerade as allies. A colleague who volunteers to finish your report, then subtly changes the content to make you look sloppy. A friend who offers emotional support, while secretly spreading your vulnerable truths behind your back. A partner who helps you by taking control of everything, until you no longer recognize your own decisions. They win twice, first by appearing generous, and second, by quietly steering you off course. False flag assistance also works through overhelping. You do so much for someone that they stop developing. They don't need to think, plan, or lead, because you always step in. At first, it feels like love, like loyalty, like teamwork. But eventually, they realize they've been stunted, numbed, outpaced by the very person who seemed to care the most. And when the damage becomes visible, when opportunities are lost, when trust erodes, when the reputation cracks, they won't be angry at first. They'll be grateful, because they still think you helped. That's the true cruelty of it. You weren't the one who left them behind. You were the one who held their hand while walking them toward the edge. False flag assistance is not failure by accident. It's destruction by favor. And the target doesn't realize it until the bill comes due. And all they can do is say thank you through clenched teeth. Guilt gifting. Guilt gifting is generosity with an ulterior motive, a velvet-gloved grip disguised as kindness. It's the calculated act of giving, not to show affection or appreciation, but to bind, to control, to make the recipient feel emotionally indebted in a way that's hard to name and even harder to shake. It is a power play masquerading as a present. At first, the gift feels like love, a surprise bouquet, an expensive gadget, a grand gesture that seems thoughtful, generous, maybe even excessive. But then comes the twist, the subtle look of disappointment when you don't respond enough, the quiet withdrawal when you don't reciprocate, the lingering loaded phrases, "After everything I've done for you," or "I just thought you'd be more grateful." That's when you realize the gift wasn't given freely. It was a down payment, and your emotional balance is now in the red. This tactic works because most people have been conditioned to associate giving with virtue. We assume gifts come from a place of sincerity, and that to reject or question them is rude, ungrateful, even cruel. The manipulator weaponizes this social contract. They give, not with open hands, but with invisible strings, strings tied to expectations, silence, compliance, or devotion. And the more extravagant the gift, the heavier the guilt. In toxic relationships, guilt gifting often appears after arguments or mistreatment. The abuser shows up with flowers, a necklace, or a lavish apology trip. It looks like reconciliation, but it's actually a reset, erasing the wrongdoing without ever addressing it. In families, it's the parent who dangles financial help over your head, subtly reminding you of your dependency. In friendships or social settings, it's the person who does everything for you and then uses that history to control how you show up in return. Over time, you may start to dread the generosity. You hesitate before accepting help because you know there's a price. And yet, refusing feels ungrateful. So you accept, and the trap tightens. Not because you're greedy, but because they made you feel like you owe them your peace just to keep their love. Guilt gifting doesn't demand obedience, it buys it. With ribbons, smiles, and carefully wrapped chains. Puppet proxy. Puppet proxy is the art of control without visibility. The power move where you orchestrate actions, decisions, and conflicts through others while staying hidden behind the curtain. You never appear as the source. You never give the order out loud. Instead, you plant ideas, nudge emotions, or feed selective information to someone more visible, more reactive, more easily manipulated. And then you let them act, speak, or strike, while your fingerprints remain unseen. This tactic isn't about using people in the obvious sense. It's about guiding them just enough that they believe the decision was theirs. You pick the right proxy, someone with influence, ego, or just enough insecurity to be steered. You give them what they need, a narrative, a grievance, a purpose. You say, "I'm sure others are thinking the same thing, but no one has the courage to speak up." Or, "I wouldn't do anything, but you do what feels right." You frame the situation just enough to trigger action, and then step aside. And when the chaos hits, you're just an observer, innocent, uninvolved. You didn't send the email. You didn't start the rumor. You didn't confront the boss. You simply lit the fuse and handed it to someone else, knowing full well they'd strike the match. They take the heat. They carry the risk. You reap the reward. Puppet proxies are used everywhere. In politics, where powerful players leak information to journalists or allies to do their dirty work. In offices, where someone whispers discontent to a vocal coworker, then watches them implode in the next meeting. In relationships, where one partner subtly turns friends or family against the other, never confronting directly, only sharing concerns to activate loyalty in others. What makes this tactic so devastating is its ability to distort perception. The target never sees you coming. They defend themselves against the puppet, not realizing the strings are being pulled from a higher, quieter place. And if the proxy fails or turns on you, you discard them. After all, they acted on their own, right? Puppet proxy isn't just manipulation. It's a ghostly form of power. You're not the voice. You're the echo behind it. And by the time the damage is done, you're already moving the next set of strings.
The hero setup.
The hero setup is a masterclass in engineered dependence, a scheme in which the manipulator creates or secretly exacerbates a crisis, only to swoop in at the perfect moment to save the day. It's not just about looking good. It's about solidifying power, loyalty, and emotional control by casting yourself as the indispensable savior in a disaster of your own making. The trap begins in silence. The manipulator stirs chaos subtly, withholds information, sabotages coordination, delays decisions, lets tensions simmer unchecked. They let the situation rot just enough, never too much, never so obviously that they're blamed, until things begin to crack. People panic. The pressure rises. Fingers start pointing. No one can see where it's coming from. And then, they arrive. Calm, composed, in control. "Let me handle this. I've dealt with worse. It's a good thing I noticed when I did." Now, they are the hero, the rescuer, the one everyone feels grateful for, even if they're the reason you needed saving in the first place. And this is where the manipulation deepens, because people don't just thank them. They trust them. They rely on them. Their competence seems proven. Their authority justified. The manipulator has crafted a story in which their power is necessary, and now everyone believes it. In workplaces, this shows up as the manager who lets a project flounder due to oversight, only to rescue it at the last minute and bask in the spotlight. In relationships, it's the partner who instigates emotional drama, then offers comfort and clarity, making you feel like they're the only one who truly understands you. Even in social groups or families, it's the person who plays peacekeeper in conflicts they quietly fueled from the start. The brilliance of the hero setup is that it masquerades as selflessness. No one suspects the rescuer. No one questions the helper. Meanwhile, the manipulator consolidates power and trust, reinforcing the idea that nothing works without them. And over time, you stop looking for solutions yourself. You wait for them, because they've written themselves into your story not just as a character, but as the answer. A hero no one asked for, in a crisis you never should have had. Pathway ownership. Pathway ownership is domination through direction, a strategy not of blocking success, but of owning the only road that leads to it. You don't stop others from advancing. You simply ensure that every step forward, every door they open, every milestone they reach, must pass through you. It's control not by restriction, but by design. The map is theirs. The route is yours. This tactic begins subtly. You position yourself as the gatekeeper. You become the person with the key contacts, the platform, the training, the tools, the approval. You offer support, structure, mentorship, whatever it takes to make sure anyone seeking growth must come to you first. It feels like guidance. It feels like generosity. But it's actually the laying of invisible rails. And once they're on them, they can't stray without falling off entirely. In corporate environments, this might look like a manager who champions someone's advancement but filters all visibility, feedback, and opportunities through their own office. In social circles, it's the friend who introduces you to the right people, controls the invites, dictates the culture. In personal relationships, it's the partner who handles all decisions, networks, and next steps, under the guise of just helping. What makes pathway ownership so effective is the illusion of freedom. The target believes they are making progress. They feel like they're succeeding by merit, not realizing the system has been engineered so that their growth always benefits the owner of the path. You decide what pace they move at, what risks they can take, when they're ready for more. And if they try to step off the path, go independent, question your role, bypass your authority, you remind them, everything you've built was built through me. Over time, the target's confidence becomes tethered. They begin to believe they need you, not because they're incapable, but because every win they've ever had came from your direction. Their independence fades. Their choices shrink. And without you, they feel lost. Pathway ownership doesn't look like control. It looks like structure. But in reality, it's a cage with golden rails. And by the time they realize it, they've already walked too far to turn back, on a path that never really belonged to them in the first place. Information trap. The information trap is a quiet act of intellectual espionage, offering someone a carefully crafted, tempting secret not to bond with them, but to test them, to watch. It is the strategic release of false or sensitive information with one objective: to see where it ends up. To see who leaks it, who repeats it, who betrays the trust they were so eager to receive. It's bait, disguised as closeness. This tactic plays on the intoxicating power of insider knowledge. People crave relevance. They want to feel trusted, included, valuable. So when you lower your voice, lean in and say, "This stays between us, but..." you create a thrill, an emotional high. The listener feels chosen, special, privileged. And that's the trap. You weren't giving a secret. You were giving them a loaded gun, with no intention of keeping it hidden. The brilliance of the information trap lies in its simplicity. You don't need to accuse anyone. You don't need to guess who's disloyal. You watch. You let the information move through the shadows like ink in water, and the moment it surfaces where it shouldn't, the source reveals itself. And there it is, proof of betrayal, dressed as innocent conversation. You now know who talks too much, who can't be trusted, who performs loyalty while quietly burning bridges behind you. This tactic is devastatingly effective in high-stakes environments: corporate leadership, political campaigns, legal disputes, even tight-knit social circles. A manager may drop a piece of false intel into a meeting, just to see if it reaches the ears of a rival department. A friend might share a personal struggle to test which of their confidants turns it into gossip. A partner might confess a concern to see whether it ends up twisted in someone else's mouth the next day. The trap isn't about the content, it's about behavior, about watching how someone handles perceived power, about exposing intentions they would never show directly. And once they've failed the test, the consequences don't need to be loud, just decisive. Because now you know who to trust, and more importantly, who not to. All from one carefully placed lie whispered with the weight of a truth. Power in weakness. Power in weakness is a trap built from silence, softness, and perceived submission. It's the deliberate act of appearing small, meek, passive, inexperienced, or fragile, not because you are, but because you know what it does to people. It makes them arrogant. It makes them careless. It makes them underestimate you. And underestimation is one of the most powerful positions you can manipulate from. The moment you seem weak, others let their guard down. They speak too freely. They reveal too much. They stop watching you as a threat. You become invisible, not as a ghost, but as a shadow hiding in plain sight. And in that invisibility, you gather power, information, leverage. You observe everything they'd never show to an equal, because they don't see one in front of them. That's the bait. Their confidence swells. Yours sharpens. This tactic is ancient. It's been used by spies, survivors, and strategists across time. A seemingly harmless advisor whispers to kings and steers kingdoms. A fragile-seeming employee uncovers corruption while no one pays attention. A naive partner gathers truths in a toxic relationship, all while playing the role of the one who doesn't get it. But they do. They've always gotten it. They just let you think they didn't, until it was too late. What makes power in weakness so brutally effective is that it uses ego as a weapon, yours, not theirs. You let them think they've won. You let them believe they're smarter, stronger, irreplaceable, and they stop looking over their shoulder. That's when you move. Because weakness, real or perceived, disarms people. They assume you won't strike. They assume you need them. They assume you can't do what they can. So when you finally pull the rug, they don't just fall, they crash in disbelief. Not just because you had power, but because they never saw it coming. This tactic doesn't roar. It doesn't fight. It waits, watches, collects. It makes people write their own downfall in their overconfidence. And when they fall, they don't even realize you pushed them. They think they slipped. Because the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one everyone thinks is too weak to matter. Who's been planning everything from the corner, while no one was looking? The sympathy leak. The sympathy leak is vulnerability with an agenda. It's not about baring your soul. It's about strategically revealing just enough of your pain, weakness, or past to elicit trust, closeness, and lowered defenses from others. It's the illusion of authenticity, engineered to make people lean in, feel safe, and begin sharing their secrets, because you've shared yours. Or so they think. This tactic doesn't begin with confession. It begins with a leak, a carefully chosen detail dropped in casual conversation, a moment of emotional pause, a story that sounds accidental, but is anything but. I've struggled with that too, you say, voice soft. I don't really talk about it much, but... That hesitation is calculated. That sadness in your eyes is practiced. And the words that follow are crafted not to tell the truth, but to unlock theirs. Because when people see vulnerability, they lower their walls. They mirror it. They begin to trust. Vulnerability disarms us. It makes us feel closer to someone, makes us want to comfort, protect, confess. The sympathy leak exploits this deeply human reflex. The goal isn't emotional connection. The goal is access. To secrets, to influence, to unguarded truth. You don't overwhelm them with tragedy. That would raise suspicion. Instead, you offer something relatable: a past failure, a broken relationship, a moment of insecurity, just enough to make them feel like they've seen the real you. In reality, you've shown them exactly what you want them to see, and nothing more. This tactic is devastating in intimate relationships, manipulative friendships, and cutthroat environments where trust is currency. A cunning coworker may share a story of being overlooked or mistreated to win your sympathy and get you to speak candidly. A manipulative partner may recall their abandonment issues to keep you from leaving. A social climber might leak a story of childhood struggle to appear grounded, relatable, human. And it works, because sincerity is rarely questioned when it comes wrapped in pain. But the sympathy leak isn't truth. It's bait. It's a mask of shared struggle, worn by someone who's already 10 steps ahead. And while you're reaching out to console them, they're already inside your trust, picking the locks. The false mentor. The false mentor is betrayal in the language of wisdom. They offer guidance, advice, and support, but every word is laced with sabotage. They don't lift you up to help you rise. They lift you just high enough to watch you fall. This tactic is not about power through domination. It's about covert control under the mask of mentorship. It starts with admiration. They see your potential. They believe in you. They take you under their wing with gentle encouragement and hard-earned lessons. You feel seen, chosen, safe. But beneath the praise is a slow erosion. Advice that leads you slightly off course. Suggestions that make you second-guess your instincts. Warnings that make you play small. They feed your doubt while pretending to build your strength. And it works, because you want to trust them. The false mentor doesn't sabotage you openly. That would be too obvious. Instead, they misguide. They inflate your ego just before pushing you into the wrong room. They downplay your wins, plant insecurities, or accidentally leave you out of the loop. All under the guise of preparing you for the real world. When you fail, they act surprised, disappointed. I was just trying to help. This tactic is especially effective because it cloaks harm in the soft voice of guidance. And when you begin to notice something's wrong, you question yourself, not them. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm overreacting. That's exactly the trap. False mentors often operate in competitive environments: corporate leadership, academia, the arts. Anywhere a rising star might threaten an established one. They offer their hand, not to lift you up, but to slow you down. And once you're weakened, they reclaim their position unchallenged, while you're left wondering where it all went wrong. Because betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks gently, teaches, nods with approval, and quietly steers you off a cliff. Trojan advocacy. Trojan advocacy is betrayal in disguise, a cunning tactic where someone publicly champions your cause, praises your work, or defends your name, all while quietly planting seeds of doubt behind the scenes. It's a performance of loyalty used to dismantle you from the inside out. They wear your jersey, they clap the loudest, they stand beside you when the cameras are rolling. But when no one's looking, they shift the narrative just enough to ensure that when you fall, it won't look like sabotage. It'll look like a natural collapse. This tactic works because it disarms suspicion. When someone defends you, you trust them. You bring them closer. You share more. You let them into the places you keep protected. And others see them as part of your camp, your friend, your ally, your voice. That's the camouflage. That's what makes their betrayal so effective. Because while they're applauding you in public, they're whispering quiet warnings in private. I love them, but they're stretched thin. They're great, just a little unstable lately. They mean well, but they're in over their head. Nothing overt. Nothing that can be quoted as treason. Just soft misgivings, gentle concerns, a well-timed pause. And those whispers grow. People begin to question you. They doubt your competence, your leadership, your judgment. And all the while, Your supporter keeps smiling, keeps standing next to you, keeps saying they're just looking out for your best interests. In workplaces, Trojan advocacy shows up as the colleague who publicly praises your leadership while privately lobbying for your removal. In friendships, it's the person who says, "You're amazing," then retells your mistakes under the guise of concern. In relationships, it's the partner who always defends you to others, while quietly making sure everyone knows how difficult you are to live with. The genius of this tactic is its deniability. When the damage surfaces, they'll act shocked. "I always had their back. I don't know why people turned on them." They walk away clean, elevated even, because by the time the mask comes off, your reputation is already in tatters, brought down not by an enemy, but by the person who stood beside you the entire way down. Selective chaos. Selective chaos is a controlled fire lit in someone else's house to make your own look safe by comparison. It's the deliberate stirring of disorder, not in your territory, but in theirs, so you appear calm, competent, and reliable. It's not sabotage for destruction's sake. It's sabotage with a spotlight, meant to redirect attention and shift perception. You don't need to win. You just need everyone else to look worse. This tactic thrives on contrast. In environments where status, stability, or leadership is up for grabs, perception becomes everything. If your competitors or peers are seen as messy, divided, or reactive, then by default, you become the dependable one, the level-headed one, the voice of reason, even if your calmness is just a performance, and the chaos you're pointing to was your own creation. The manipulation often starts with small, untraceable disruptions, a rumor whispered in the right ear, a deadline quietly miscommunicated, a conflict nudged ever so slightly with a careless comment. "I heard she wasn't happy with how you handled that." Tension builds. Systems start to stutter. People become suspicious of one another, and the cracks begin to show. You don't interfere. You don't solve. You observe. And when asked about the turmoil, you shrug, steady and composed, as if you're somehow above it all. In corporate settings, selective chaos might mean feeding bad data to a rival department, letting them stumble in front of leadership while your team shines. In social circles, it's subtly turning friends against each other while positioning yourself as the glue holding everyone together. In families, it's stoking conflict between siblings or relatives just enough to appear like the only rational, trustworthy one left. The brilliance of this tactic is that you don't need to rise. You can make others fall. You control the narrative not by speaking, but by watching the fire spread from the match you accidentally dropped. And the best part? No one ever suspects the calm one, the one offering quiet advice, the one who somehow always seems unaffected. Selective chaos isn't just misdirection, it's manufactured comparison. And in a world where people judge value by contrast, all you have to do is make sure the room next door is burning, so yours feels like the safest place to be. Calculated withdrawal. Calculated withdrawal is the manipulation of absence, a deliberate retreat designed not to disconnect, but to intensify desire, attention, and perceived value. It is the strategic pulling away from a person, group, or situation just long enough to create tension, doubt, and longing. The goal is not to leave permanently. It's to make your return feel essential, to remind others what you bring by showing them what it's like without you. This tactic preys on one of the most powerful psychological forces in human behavior: scarcity. What's constant becomes invisible. What's unavailable becomes valuable. When you're always around, always accessible, always offering your presence, people begin to normalize it. They take it for granted. They lower their perception of your worth, not out of malice, but out of habit. So the manipulator disappears. Not in anger, not in chaos, but with quiet precision. They stop answering as quickly. They leave messages on read. They skip the meeting. They bow out of the group chat. And suddenly, the room feels colder. The dynamic shifts. People wonder why you're distant, where you went, what they did. They overanalyze. They reflect. They miss you. And in that space of absence, your importance grows. Not because you changed, but because now they have to imagine you again. Calculated withdrawal is used by charismatic leaders, romantic manipulators, and power players alike. A boss might distance themselves from a team to make them feel directionless, then return with solutions that re-establish authority. A partner might go quiet after a fight, not to heal, but to make you chase, apologize, bend. A friend might fade out just long enough for the group to feel incomplete, and then return at the perfect moment, welcomed like royalty. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its timing. Leave too soon, you're forgotten. Stay gone too long, you lose your grip. But vanish just long enough for your absence to be felt, and you become unforgettable. You create space not to exit, but to re-enter on your terms, to shift power without ever raising your voice. Because when you control when you appear, you control how you're perceived. And when people start fearing your silence more than your presence, you've already won. Inverted confrontation. Inverted confrontation is a psychological judo move, absorbing an attack not with resistance, but with exaggerated kindness, sweetness, and grace, so unnaturally calm that it throws your opponent off balance and turns the crowd against them. It is the act of meeting aggression not with retaliation, but with serene submission, in order to frame your attacker as unhinged, irrational, or even abusive. You win not by fighting back, but by making their anger look like an ugly stain on your spotless composure. This tactic flips the emotional script. When someone lashes out, publicly or privately, the natural expectation is defense, tension, a return of fire. But when you respond with gentle words, an understanding nod, or worse, compassion, it shocks the attacker. It makes them feel foolish. More importantly, it makes everyone watching uncomfortable. Suddenly, they're yelling while you're being gracious. They're furious while you're forgiving. And the dynamic flips. Now you're the victim. You're the bigger person. And they've just become their own worst PR. The brilliance of inverted confrontation is that it forces your opponent into a lose-lose position. If they continue to escalate, they look cruel and unstable. If they back down, they look weak. Either way, you maintain the moral high ground, not because you're right, but because you played the optics better. You didn't just refuse to fight. You made their anger look inappropriate. In relationships, this might look like the partner who, after being confronted for wrongdoing, responds with a soft, "I understand why you're upset. You have every right to feel that way," while never addressing the actual harm. In the workplace, it's the colleague who, after being criticized for poor performance, calmly thanks you for the feedback, then subtly paints you as the difficult one. To outsiders, it looks like grace. To insiders, it's warfare without weapons. The manipulator using this tactic doesn't want to win the argument. They want to win the room. They weaponize politeness as a shield and let the attacker hang themselves with their own frustration. And by the end, you're not seen as combative or aggressive. You're seen as the voice of reason, while they walk away angry, exposed, and defeated in a fight they thought they started on their terms. But they never stood a chance. Because you never fought, you performed. The gossip funnel. The gossip funnel is weaponized whispering, a method of controlling narratives not by spreading rumors yourself, but by channeling them through an unwitting third party. It's a tactic rooted in subtle manipulation, where you carefully select someone known for talking too much, someone who can't resist just sharing what they've heard, and you feed them exactly what you want the world to believe. The brilliance? You never have to say a word publicly. The funnel does it for you. It begins with calculated vulnerability. You confide something to your chosen funnel, just enough truth to sound believable, just enough scandal to spark interest, just enough spin to serve your agenda. You lower your voice, maybe add a sigh. I shouldn't even be saying this. And that's the hook. Because when people feel like they're getting exclusive, forbidden knowledge, they can't help but pass it on. It makes them feel important, in the loop, useful, and so they repeat it, word for word, adding their own emphasis, exaggeration, and emotional color. You know this person well. You've seen them gossip before. Maybe they call it venting or being concerned. Maybe they dress it up as caring. But you understand the truth. They're a broadcast tower looking for a signal, and you've just given them one. The power of the gossip funnel lies in distance. When the rumor spreads, and it will, no one traces it back to you. You were simply talking in confidence. You didn't ask them to share it. And if it ever causes fallout, you can act shocked, betrayed even. I told them that in private. I didn't think they'd repeat it. Meanwhile, your message has reached every corner of the room. This tactic is ruthlessly effective in offices, social circles, politics, and family dynamics. It's how you shape perception without taking the fall. How you assassinate character without lifting the knife. How you introduce doubt, conflict, suspicion, while remaining the innocent observer. The gossip funnel isn't just about spreading a story. It's about owning the story while appearing detached from it. And by the time the truth catches up, if it ever does, the damage has already been done. Your silence was your shield. Your words, echoed perfectly by someone else. Time scarcity game. The time scarcity game is power through pretense, a subtle manipulation tactic that hinges on one simple illusion. I'm too busy for you. It's the act of inflating your schedule, dramatizing your availability, and projecting an aura of in-demand exclusivity to create the illusion of higher status and worth. In a world where time equals importance, acting like yours is scarce makes others instinctively believe that your attention, your approval, your presence must be valuable. This tactic doesn't require actual success, just the appearance of it. You don't need to be booked wall to wall. You just need to talk like you are. Decline invitations, not with refusal, but with, I'd love to, but this week is chaos. Show up late with an apology and a vague comment about back-to-back meetings. Take longer to reply to messages, especially when the other person needs something. When you do respond, keep it brief, polite, but cool. The message is clear. You are lucky I made time for you at all. People interpret time as status. Someone who's always available is seen as desperate, replaceable, or low value. But someone who seems busy, even elusive, creates a pull. Others chase. They wait longer for replies. They schedule around you. They try harder to impress you, just to stay in your orbit. You haven't said a word about your worth. Your perceived lack of time has done all the speaking for you. In dating, this tactic makes you appear like a prize, someone who has options, who doesn't need to chase. In business, it paints you as high demand, someone with clients lined up and priorities to manage. In social circles, it makes you mysterious, even admirable. And best of all, it gives you control. You decide when to show up. You decide when to make time. You dictate the tempo of the relationship, because they're waiting on you. But beneath it all, it's a performance, a well-acted mirage. The time scarcity game doesn't make you more accomplished. It just makes you seem harder to reach. And in a world addicted to urgency and access, sometimes that illusion is all it takes to be treated like royalty. Because when time is currency, acting like you're bankrupt in availability makes everyone else feel like they're chasing gold. Tactical oversharing. Tactical oversharing is the art of calculated vulnerability, a manipulation cloaked in intimacy, where you reveal a seemingly personal truth not to connect, but to unlock. It's the deliberate disclosure of minor, low-risk secrets designed to provoke reciprocity, to bait the other person into sharing something far more significant. You give a little, they give a lot. You act open, they let their guard down. And by the time they realize what's happened, They've handed you leverage disguised as trust. This tactic preys on one of the most primal human instincts, the need to reciprocate. When someone shares something emotional, embarrassing, or painful, we feel compelled to meet them halfway. It feels unfair to stay guarded when someone else appears to be opening up. So we lower our shields, soften our tone, and begin to reveal the things we usually protect. But in the case of tactical oversharing, this is exactly what the manipulator is counting on. The story they tell may sound intimate, a past heartbreak, a family rift, a personal mistake, but it's never something that can truly harm them. It's rehearsed, polished, just flawed enough to seem real. They might say, "I've never told anyone this," when in truth, they've told everyone they needed to. And as you sit there thinking, wow, they trust me, they're watching your face, your body language, waiting for the opening to ask, "What about you?" Once you begin to talk, really talk, they draw it out gently, nodding, validating, mirroring. You feel safe, seen, understood. And then you give them what they came for, something vulnerable, something real, something they can use. In toxic relationships, this tactic is used to gather ammunition while posing as emotionally available. In workplaces, it can be a manipulative colleague fishing for internal politics by appearing relatable. Even in friendships, it can surface as the person who always shares just enough mess to make you share more, then quietly stores what you said for future leverage. The danger of tactical oversharing is that it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like closeness. That's what makes it work. Because by the time you realize they weren't opening a door, they were picking a lock. Your secrets are already in their hands. The Martyr Gambit. The Martyr Gambit is self-sacrifice laced with strategy, a calculated move to give something up, endure something painful, or take the hit, not out of nobility, but to gain moral leverage. It's the art of appearing selfless, loyal, or heroic by letting go of something you never truly needed, only so you can later hold it over others like a blood-stained badge of honor. You don't play the victim. You play the heroic victim, the one who suffered for the greater good. This tactic is a masterstroke in emotional manipulation because people instinctively admire sacrifice. We're wired to respect those who endure pain, who give for others, who put others first. So when someone gives something up, time, money, a title, an opportunity, everyone assumes their motives are pure. But in the Martyr Gambit, the sacrifice is a setup. It's rarely something that truly costs the manipulator. It's a pawn they're willing to lose in order to gain the queen: sympathy, control, and long-term influence. You'll hear it in their tone when the debt is quietly called in. "I stepped aside so you could have your moment. I gave that up to keep the peace. I didn't say anything, even though I was the one who really suffered." Each line drips with unspoken accusation. The sacrifice was made to buy moral credit, and now it's time to spend it. In workplaces, the martyr might give up a promotion for the team, only to later wield it as proof of their loyalty and expect unchallenged authority because of it. In relationships, it's the partner who put their dreams on hold and uses that fact to guilt trip whenever conflict arises. In families, it's the sibling who always makes the hard choices and demands obedience as repayment. The Martyr Gambit works because it twists empathy into obligation. It turns emotional debts into behavioral control. Others feel like they can't challenge or criticize someone who's given so much, even if that sacrifice was never truly selfless. And the person who played the gambit knows it. They don't need to remind you outright. They just have to act like they've already paid the price. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because once someone bleeds publicly, strategically, you're left with the unspoken burden of never making them bleed again.